there was, if there was an influence, it might have been from some of our peers, seeing bands like the Melvins or Malfunction going from really fast to kind of slow and grooving, and and Black Flag doing something similar, St. Vitus. I guess it acknowledged that the parameters for punk rock were a lot broader than we may have allowed it to have been initially, in the early 80s or late 70s.
You just heard Born Too Late from St. Vitus's album, Born Too Late. This is the Record Metal Podcast. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jason. And this is our sludgy spring, doomy summer series that we are starting. And we thought there's really only two bands that you could probably start this whole thing off with if we're doing American focus. And
there's three.
These Guys in Trouble and
Pentagram.
But we already did a Pentagram show.
True,
So
but
in my mind, I was thinking like there's only two that we haven't really dove into. Yeah,
true.
They're the big three American doom bands, the progenitors of like what we sort of see in modern times of the doom metal scene.
Yeah, they were the ones keeping it alive in the 80s.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I think it's appropriate. The song we sort of open with kind of speaks to, I think, what was so weird about that era, in that everybody was on cocaine and playing speed metal and doing glam rock, and it was about
Tony Iommi
Flash.
Was still
and Flash.
doing Black Sabbath on cocaine, but he managed to keep it slow. He just
most of the time, but even those Tony Martin albums have a little bit more propulsion to them, and stuff. And so the lyrics, we felt, Born Too Late is kind of the anthem in a lot of ways for St. Vitus. But, when Wino, who we'll talk about him in a moment, he says, they say I look like the living dead. They say I can't have much in my head. They say my songs are much too slow, but they don't know the things I know. I'll never be like you. I'm born too late.
Those are very Geezer Butler lyrics.
Mm-hmm. They're prophetic for what was happening in the time.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I think, say what you will about Sabbath. Sabbath had some commercial success in the 70s.
They had a lot of commercial success.
They did fine.
Yeah.
And so they were of the moment. And in a lot of ways, Vitus and Trouble and Pentagram and some of these other bands are definitely not of the moment.
Yeah.
They're ahead of what's going to come in the 90s. And
I mean, I would throw Sir Thungel in that as well.
Sure. Yeah.
And
Manila
Road, like just being out of time a little bit, but like if you stick to what you love, eventually people will come around and figure out what you're about.
Sure. Yeah. And I think like I think this was sort of put really well by Jay Bennett, who writes for Decibel and many other publications and stuff, and you kind of know Jay a little bit through the grapevine. I've never actually met Jay.
I went to the Mutter Museum with him in San Francisco and Philadelphia, years ago with Scott Carlson and a handful of other people.
So when he did when Born Too Late, which is kind of seen in a lot of ways as kind of the kind of like the Vitus record, although I think like Mark and I would argue there's many Vitus records that have their own sort of value or whatever, but it's kind of the one
if you're like a casual, if you're like,
it's the signature one.
I need to get the signature album by this band. Like, okay, you don't want to get the full, like, I figure with this band, you either get that or you get the full discography.
Yeah. You either just dip your toe in or you just dive right in kind of thing. But I think like he really succinctly kind of describes like what Vitus kind of is in the intro to his Hall of Fame, his Decibel Hall of Fame for it. And he says, St. Vitus were a living, breathing anachronism in every possible way. Guitarist Dave Chandler, bassist Mark Adams, drummer Armando Acosto, and vocalist Scott Riegers crawled out of the industrial wasteland of Lomita, California in 1979, playing dinosaur doom when LA's squalid underground was ruled by the hardcore punk aesthetic of Black Flag. Vitus invoked the fuzzed-out, drugged-out riff hypnosis of Sabbath at a time when their musical mentors in the Drab Four were at their pre-Dio nadir. All through the 80s, they wrote torrid doom epics while speed metal exploded across LA County in the form of Metallica, Slayer, and Dark Angel. They were bell-bottom long hairs playing bleary-eyed dirge metal on an SST roster that had built its punk-as-fuck reputation with Black Flag, Minutemen, and weirdo rock bands like Saccharine, Trust, and Meat Puppets. Thrust into a scene they had hardly anything in common with, Vitus spent most of their career getting spit on while touring with the likes of Flag, The Mentors, and The Brood. After recording 2 full-lengths and an EP, Rieger split mid-tour within days of finding his own replacement and burgeoning DC death glam iconoclast Scott Wino Weinrich. In 1986, the new Vitus lineup recorded their 6-song masterpiece, Born Too Late. And so I think, you know, it's easy for us to sit back now in 2021 and really admire Vitus and be like, oh, this is, of course, this people must have loved this.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
No.
And that's kind of the story of this band in a lot of ways. You know, I think even more so than Trouble. I feel like Trouble at least like got something when they got on Deaf American. There was like a moment where Trouble had some traction a little bit.
Yeah, I think
Vitus maybe bad luck. I don't know.
I think Trouble was always more fringe. I think Vitus was more out there, but also more not vilified, but more despised, perhaps, because they didn't fit anywhere. They were always more like, it was okay to like Vitus, Motorhead, Metallica, and Slayer. Yeah, if you're like punk in my era of like the mid to late 80s. But I didn't really know anything about Vitus until the early 90s.
Yeah, I heard
like from name dropping from Cathedral and stuff. And
yep,
I never really heard that. Headbangers Ball had a video.
Did they?
I can't remember what the fuck it was. I don't really remember it because I was like, oh my god, these guys look like Cheech and Chong.
Yeah, well. I mean, Dave, in a lot of ways, Dave sports like the sort of headband kind of look. Like him and like Uli John Roth, like to me, are like the best representatives of like, you know, that kind of look from that like kind of late 70s aesthetic.
Except Dave's not losing his hair.
That's true. Yeah, Uli's hiding it. Yeah, give props to Dave. He's still got the full healthy head. I think like, you know, the intro that people heard like at the very, very beginning, that little quick quote from Kim Thayil from Soundgarden. Maybe that's kind of how I heard about Vitus, was almost through like the grunge window a little bit. Yeah. You know, when I kind of start listening to, you know, Soundgarden and Chains and then like Caius and Monster Magnet, I think it was like discussed in those circles.
I mean, that was the most name dropped subgenre I've like ever.
Doom?
No, grunge and alternative.
Oh yeah.
Because they would freely name drop.
Yeah, they were very reverent.
Stuff. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, we love the Melvins and we love Meat Puppets and, you know, 4 other bands you never heard of before.
Sure.
So I think it made a lot of people go out and search, but it seemed like people were...
I mean, I had a Flipper CD. Yeah. Because like Nirvana and Henry Rollins talked about them, and like I remember not knowing what to do with this Flipper thing, you know, like because it didn't make sense to me, you know, at the time.
Yeah, so. Like even like, you know, the Germs got another like big bump in popularity back then.
When Pat Smear joined Nirvana, like that was a huge thing.
Yeah, I mean, even before, like I remember people wearing those shirts.
Yeah,
it's like, who the fuck? This is like an old band. What do you guys give a shit about this about? But yeah, that was like a real melting pot. For some reason, journalism was asking, you know, where'd it come from?
Yeah. But I think like, you know, Pentagram always seemed kind of like they didn't get their due at the time, you know.
Well, Bobby's a junkie.
That hurt a lot.
You know, and
too.
They were very regional.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many people actually heard. I don't know how many shows they played. I mean, there's like the Gene Simmons story, the Kiss story, from the documentary or whatever, where they came to hear him in the basement play and dismissed them as just idiots, basically.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that was, I think they were such a small thing. They just happened to be doing it. And like, unfortunately, like Bobby's issues have slowed them down as, you know, every step of the way. And I saw them, 2019. They came through my small town and, you know, played, I don't think you saw that show, did you?
I didn't, no.
They played, just basically inside of Detroit. But it was great. You know, he was wearing like his mom's clothes and, you know, doing all the songs you want to hear, and it was a good time. But yeah, I think if he would have been less medicated, and they could have actually toured a little more, I think they would have made a little bit more of a more mainstream.
Yeah.
They would have been one of those 3 that would have got signed.
Yeah.
But yeah, instead it was like Trouble was, I don't think Trouble was very big either. I think Vitus was like a whipping boy, and then Trouble was like, oh shit, these guys are kind of doing the same. I mean, Trouble rough thing, but
yeah, I think Vitus might have had, and it's hard to say, like the fact that they were on SST gave them like a weird badge that like other bands didn't have, because like
I think it went both ways.
It hurt them because they were fighting constantly against like the Black Flag persona and the what people expected out of an SST band at that point. But, you know, like in a way it made me notice them. I kind of was like, oh, that's cool that like they're on SST, because I like other SST bands, and I didn't understand how like how it all worked. You know, I didn't get that like you can't like punk and hardcore and doom and
you can like Sabbath though. Yeah, it was all kinds of
you
unspoken rules.
You can't do all that, because I came up in the era in the 90s when that all got very blurred, because of the grunge and some of those bands that just like grew up embracing it all and said, fuck it. Like, why can't we like all this stuff? You know?
That's kind of where we're at now.
Sure. Yeah. And it's a good place to be.
It's taken 50 years, but we got there.
I mean, I guess like of that scene, Witchfinder wasn't around for very long, and they were English, of course. I mean, they're kind of like coming out into Wabam. No one really framed themselves as Doom at that point. I mean, I think Dave talks about how really it's not till they start touring Europe that people kind of start calling them Doom, and they're like, oh, that kind of sticks, like that. That kind of makes sense. The only contemporary I can see that maybe had some success, and I don't know how much really commercial success they had, would maybe be Candlemass over in Europe. Candlemass was doing similar types of things that Trouble and Vitus and Pentagram were kind of doing, but
well, I mean, Candlemass toured the States a couple times in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
I always heard their name thrown around from people, like older people usually.
Did you hear, did you and Chris hear about like Vitus a lot, like in the early years of Requiem and stuff like that?
I mean, it was just like known as it wasn't like, it was more of like a name drop thing. Like Lee Doreen would talk about him or, like that. It wasn't, I don't really remember anybody really talking about them it wasn't like anybody would go out to see.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what kind of package deals they were going on at the time.
Yeah, and I don't know. Yeah, on the Children of Doom tour,
I don't really know how much they toured on that, to be honest, because he only had time.
Yeah, that's true. Christos had his visa. He had to kind of go back. Yeah, I don't know.
I think they've always had a short end of the stick. A lot of things.
It seems like kind of a bad luck kind of thing. Like even like we're going to be hearing some interview clips from Dave Chandler throughout our 2 episodes that we've kind of got going here. And I think like one thing he alludes to is just like, especially like album covers, like Born Too Late. He'll talk about that album cover. It just, a lot of things like didn't work the way they were kind of supposed to.
Well, the whole LSD thing, the lead singer syndrome.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. That kind of rotation. I guess I knew about Wino maybe before I knew about St. Vitus.
Because he would guest on things and
the Obsessed
outspoken
released their big record Church Within in 94. It was almost part of that like Columbia earache type deal. It was a major
earache,
but it was Columbia at the time that Cathedral and all those other bands, and we got that Church Within and like dug it, and then I later found out, this guy used to sing with St. Vitus. And I was like, oh, okay. You're trying to put the pieces of this kind of together and make some sense pre-internet in terms of what you're kind of discovering and stuff. But yeah, I think we got to start with the first era, right? We'll get to Born Too Late a little bit later.
Gotta go back to Scotty.
We got to go back to Scotty.
The other Scotty.
Yes.
Or there's Scott and then there's Scotty.
Yes. I mean, they kind of started off as Tyrant. They formed in 79. They changed their name in 81, and they kind of put out their first demos in 83. And they kind of, what's really interesting when you think about it, they're coming out of like LA, and it really kind of predates the explosion of hair metal in LA. They're like predating all that, really. Yeah. Like Rat and Motley Crue really don't break till like 83, 84.
Yeah, the strip wasn't like it was in the 80s.
So like again, they're even they're almost like a carryover from like what was going on. Like they really sound like Sir Lord Baltimore or something like that. They sound like a band that was putting something out in like 71, 72, like the proto metal stuff that we played in our proto metal countdown. And
well, I think Dave mentioned something in one of the clips where he's saying like they would have been made more sense being in 1968.
Yes,
I mean there's such a blue cheer California vibe to these guys too.
Yeah,
that there's like Sabbath-isms, but there's just as much.
There's a lot of garage blue cheer.
Yeah,
there's like a lot of Hendrix-isms in terms of some of the psychedelic aspects that Dave brings in.
But my favorite like succinct way of him talking about. I think this might have been one of the YouTube interviews or something I was watching, but he's talking about how like Mark was really into Leonard Skinner and then Dave was really into Priest.
Yep.
And they made it like when you hear that, it's just like shit, that just like Trouble was like, we wanted to mix Black Sabbath and Judas Priest together. It's like, wow, you guys did a fucking great job.
Yeah, I think it was I've got it in one of the interviews here. Hang on. I think it was like, Armando Armando was into sorry about that, making some noise. Yeah, Armando was into God dang it, I wrote it down and I'm pissed that I can't find it. Yeah, you had it right. Priest was like Dave was into Priest, and
Mark was into Skinnerd.
Yep, Mark was into Skinnerd.
There's like a Hellfest thing on YouTube I was watching about that.
Yeah,
but Armando had already passed at that point in the interview.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, dang it, I had it.
He had something very specific too. I forgot now.
What's that? Armando?
Yeah.
It was our arterial disease. Something with his arteries.
No. His musical.
Oh yeah,
entry point.
I wrote it down. I can't find it. It'll probably come up later in my notes. My notes are like kind of all over the place, so my apologies. But yeah, I came up with the Skinnerd thing and the Priest thing, and then there was one other band. It was whatever Armando was into, and I thought I had written it down somewhere, but I don't know, it's on some note that I put. But yeah, so these guys, they start kind of forming together, and they kind of got hooked up through SST. Through Scott Rieger, the vocalist. Mm-hmm. He had a friendship with the Circle Jerks, and also through another like LA version of Overkill, which were kind of like a early crossover kind of band, not the Overkill. Mm-hmm. That took me a moment, like my cognitive dissonance when I first read that. I was like, wait.
No Bobby Blitz or Didi Verney there. Yeah.
Well, because Overkill like kind of was like a foot in punk too, a little bit in the early years. So I was like almost like, wait, what? Like, this is weird. I didn't realize they're part of that sort of story. And basically they got Black Flag to sort of come and check them out. And it was Greg Ginn and Chuck Dukowski that watched their gig, and boom, that's how they kind of get signed.
Also, their first show they ever did at St. Vitus was booked. They played open for Dokken.
Yes. And do you know what happens at that show? I found this. This is kind of interesting. Here it is. So this is from Dave. This is a quote. He goes, the thing is he talks about this because this is going to be a story later for how they end up like working with Don.
Yeah.
He says, the thing is that we got very cheap prices because of Don, and Armando, and him and Armando were together in high school.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. So they knew each other. Plus he owed us some, as before they actually played that kind of mainstream hair metal, we played with them at some show. And even if we were just one of the 4 bands opening for them that night, he had an amplifier problem and asked us if he could borrow Mark's amplifier. Sadly, he blew it up during the show, and ever since he kept saying that he'd pay us back one day. So this was his chance to kind of and even officially co-produce it in order to like pay them back. So the reason he gave him such a great studio deal for a later record is because of these early gigs where he like blew up Mark's bass amp.
As much as Don Dokken can come across as kind of a douche, I think he's really he's in the music for the right reasons.
Yeah, he's kind of long-term listeners of Requiem Metal know that we have a soft spot for Dokken.
Oh, yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, wait till next episode.
Rockin' for Dokken. Yeah, exactly. But, so that's kind of what basically got him signed. And then by 1984, they're kind of working on their debut record, which is the self-titled, the first
of their 2 self-titled.
So just like Trouble.
Yeah, the second one, I've got some intellectual justification for why they did a second self-titled, but I'll talk about that when we get there.
Yeah. And essentially it was like a rehearsal. That first one is really just like a recorded live demo release.
They all played straight to tape. They didn't isolate or anything. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, again, the thing is like, even though they do sound like they're coming out of like, Sabbath, Blue Cheer, they're also coming out of the punk scene in a weird way. So they have the punk aesthetic. They've got the punk attitude, the DIY. All their albums, except for like one, are like short and sweet. 30 to no longer than 40 minutes, most of them.
Yeah.
So they, even though they have these trappings of being kind of like a Sabbath band or whatever you want to kind of call them, a hard rock band from the 70s playing in the 80s, they're still like, again, part of that same kind of scene that a lot of the other SST bands had similar attitudes, in terms of how to produce music and make it.
I mean, most of the SST bands, to be fair, they were coming out, they were like the second wave of punk.
Yeah.
So, second wave of Sabbath, like Sabbath was such a, like, I can't even begin to understand how important they are to heavy music, So when people say they're Sabbathy, like, that's like somebody like, oh yeah, we liked hard rock, or we liked the New York Dolls, or we took a little bit of that. Like, it was just the next thing.
Sure.
It's hard to quantify, but it seems like bands that have that vibe sometimes get kind of sidelined as just being repetitive, as just, just sounding like Sabbath or who else is there that sounds even close to that?
I mean, like I said, I threw like your Sir Lord Baltimore's, your Captain Beyond's. I mean, there was a handful. Yeah. There weren't a lot, but there were bands that were.
But nobody knew who those bands were back in the day.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. That's like something that's like been rediscovered through like proto metal and
Leaf Hound and all that kind of shit.
Yep. But essentially that sort of. How would you describe Scott as a vocalist? Because I think he adds. We're going to talk a lot about Wino later, but I think Scott adds such a unique quality because he's not an Ozzy clone.
No.
If anything, he reminds me the most maybe of like Bobby a little bit from Pentagram in terms of some of his nuances and some of his like
I would say like the first two Priest records.
A little bit of that.
He's got some of that. He's got
Wings.
Some David Byron, Uriah Heep.
Yep. I hear some Paul Di'Anno.
Like pre-King Diamondisms.
Yeah.
Very, very over-the-top, theatrical. There was some quote that Dave was saying about his vocals. Like, it was something like, it's like if Bela Lugosi saying heavy metal or something like that type. Because he's got a lot of just weirdness. Like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you first see it. It's kind of off-putting.
Yeah.
The first time I heard stuff that wasn't Wino, I was like, this, 25 years ago. And now the Wino stuff's like, it's pretty good, but like Scott's such a singular vocalist. It like elevates the stuff more than I think Wino did.
Yeah. I
as far as longevity is concerned.
Yeah, it's tough for me because I like all the Wino stuff and I like all the Scott stuff. So it's like a Sophie's choice. I don't really know.
It's like Dio and Ozzy and Tony Martin and
they all bring something completely different to the table.
Yeah.
Scott fits
it's
better.
All equally interesting.
I think Scott fits better with the garagey punk stuff a little bit, and Wino fits better with the more sort of guitar-driven.
It's all kind of like
stuff,
real pop sensibility with Wino.
Sure, he brings that. He's got like a soulful, bluesy kind of aspect that kind of comes in. Although Scott has that, especially on the last record. Scott brings some of that more bluesy, soulful sort of style, less like the kind of new album punky kind of aesthetic that he had in the early years. So it's it's interesting. So I'm kind of curious what like listeners who are new to Vitus, like what your takeaway is, like kind of at the end, like with what kind of stuff you like and sort of don't like and stuff. But I think like, the one thing you got to think about these guys is they're signed to SST, which is a punk label. They never set out to create doom. It wasn't even a thing yet. In a lot of ways, they're just trying to like art out kind of Sabbath. They're just kind of like, they have this singular vision of what they want to do, and it's like very uncool.
Yeah.
And like, they don't care. And I think that's kind of the coolest part about them is like how uncool they were for the time.
They're doing it because they love it.
Yeah. It's completely like a blind love, loyalty to this aesthetic, to this vision. Like the way Dave dressed, like just kind of like a hippie almost. He's like kind of straight out of that sort of scene. Almost like you get the feeling like some of the early descriptions, like Cliff Burton, is like what like Dave was kind of like that type of a character in like a scene that was not, wasn't like that, in a certain sense. But they took the name from. Partially from St. Vitus's Dance, the Sabbath song from Volume 4, but also St. Vitus was like patron saint. I can't remember, something to do with like art and music of some sort. But I've actually been to the St. Vitus Cathedral in Prague. It's pretty metal. It's one of the most like metal looking cathedrals like I've ever seen. But yeah, so they kind of believe that St. Vitus himself was like kind of always looking out for the band a little bit.
Patron saint of dancers and entertainers.
There you go. So I knew it had something to do with kind of music and stuff like that. And, he kind of, in that Decibel Hall of Fame, he kind of recounts couple of stories about like, I think the thing that you got to think about too is like, these guys are similar in a way to Trouble in that they bring in kind of a Christian aesthetic too. And that was something I didn't know that much about Vitus. I knew that with Trouble because like that was always like tagged onto Trouble.
Yeah.
I guess I never knew that association that much until I started doing a lot more research into Vitus. Were you aware of that kind of part?
I mean, I really liked some of the, Christian symbology and stuff, but I didn't get into the lyrics enough if there was anything there. But
yeah, I mean, there's like, some of them like are just like the white light or white, what is the song? White Magic, Black Magic. That was like their commentary on like what they saw with like Venom and some of those like satanic bands kind of coming up, and they sort of saw themselves as like an antidote to some of that kind of stuff. Yeah. I've got some quotes kind of about that from the Decibel Hall of Fame. Like Acosto, Bennett asked them, Born Too Late seemed to reinforce Vitus's reputation as Christians, even though it wasn't a particularly religious band. And he says, Acosta says, we believe, but it's not something we preach. Very early on, we did a show with Scotty at this place in Anaheim, and the club owner liked us and everything, but a couple of the girls told him later that we were a devil band, and he shouldn't let us play there. So I think that's why we decided to add the cross inside the V on the band logo. We wanted to let people know that we weren't a satanic band.
I mean, that's like Sabbath is pretty... It's pretty ubiquitous to
like After Forever. Yeah, After Forever in a sense is sort of like a Christian anthem. It's about like kind of fear of the devil and respect of evil and.
But yeah, they were using it as a totem. Yeah, to protect themselves, like the crosses that Tony's dad made him or whatever. Yeah. I actually found, I don't remember where the fuck I got this. A big cross that looks like some of the like early on ones that they used to wear that I got on one of my bulletin boards.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. Yeah. Mark Adams goes on. He says, we're obviously not a religious band like Stripe or anything, but we wanted to make it clear that we had nothing to do with the devil because for some reason that question seemed to come up a lot. Maybe because we wore black and we were always being compared to Black Sabbath. And it just started to bug us. People always want to pin you down in a certain category. So we wrote a few songs like Hag and Prayer for the Masses to let people know what we really believed in. And Hag stood for like, they tell the story. It was actually written by a friend of his. But we'll get to that when we get to Born Too Late. But yeah, and then Chandler says, yeah, we're believers. We still are, but we weren't a Christian band. We were just against what the satanic bands were preaching, which is not to say we didn't like some of them. He says, I love Venom, but I really didn't like the fact that they would get a bunch of kids in the audience screaming, Hail Satan. I thought that was stupid, just a dumbass thing to do to sell records. So we were anti-Satan, but we were not like we were religious. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way of doing it. But yeah, he tells stories about like how they always felt like they had this sort of like protection from St. Vitus and things like that. He tells a story like how Dave fell on his wedding day. Mm-hmm. He was holding like a glass of wine or something like that, and he fell like on his hands and fell on the wine glass, and the wine glass like didn't break. And he says had it broke, it would have like cut his tendons, so he couldn't have been able to like play guitar and shit like that. Jesus. And then there's a couple stories they tell about like Wino ODing in the house and like being revived without having to like call an ambulance and shit like that. Like like Wino should have died, but like. So again, whether you believe or don't believe, it's just they believe, and it's kind of part of like their kind of aesthetic and stuff like that, which I think is kind of really interesting about the band. So
I mean, without Christianity, black metal would be pretty boring.
But absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So let's get into some of the songs that we're going to sort of hear here.
All right.
So what are I guess the first song we're going to hear is of course the Saint Vitus. Yeah. It's got some of the punk fury in, in it a little bit. It's not as like aggressively doom as say like the Psychopath and Burial at Sea,
Yeah.
Which are more like monolithic kind of sounding tunes, a little bit. Do you have sort of a favorite from this record? Dave loves the side 2. He kind of always talks about how like powerful side 2 of this record is, compared to like side 1 and stuff, but
I mean, I don't even own the full record yet.
Yeah.
Or no,
yeah.
Not this one.
This is the one that's hard to find.
So as far as sides are concerned, I don't really know. I think there's the funny thing is a couple of these songs are almost like Burial at Sea. I think War is Our Destiny. Those are 2 songs that almost.
I think War is from their next one.
Is that from the next one?
That's from Hallows. Yeah. Still a Scott song though. Yeah.
But yeah, it has. Like it's almost the blueprint of what they would go on and do like 10 or 15 other songs from each absolutely. One.
Yep.
That's kind of these early ones are kind of seems like it's kind of taking everything, distilling it down to it's like most Vitus essence.
Yeah.
And I think that's when we get to Wino, that's where they're kind of like boiled down more.
Sure.
This is more the, like kind of the early on.
It's very loose and open, and they're kind of trying a lot of kind of things out. I think
there's lots of new album happening in here.
Yeah.
There's like Sad Wings of Destiny shit happening, and a lot of 70s coming in that's not Sabbath.
Yep. I think, Psychopath is, Burial of Sea and Psychopath are both part of like Dave's kind of favored side too. And I said, like, on Psychopath, we kind of see them kind of getting into this like doomy, loose, kind of introspective side a little bit. The song in a lot of ways is in no hurry to get anywhere specific, which I think is cool because it allows for some like really haunting, I said like kind of almost like phantasmagoric passages to sort of like kind of come in. There's a lot of, this is a song where you hear a lot of like late 60s Hendrix and Blue Cheer kind of stuff sort of woven in.
Brightness.
Dave's solo work. I mean, that's something that's going to be like a common theme throughout like these 2 episodes. Like his solo work is so inspired and iconic, and it's really like kind of a template I wrote for a yet unnamed scene, which is the 90s doom scene, and the stoner rock scene and all that stuff that Caius is, the Magnets, like all Nebulas, Fu Manchus. It's almost all really here. Like, and yeah, Dave's drawing on Tony and other guys that came before him and Hendrix and stuff, but Randy Holden, who played with Blue Cheer. But it's like he's like almost like distilling it a little bit. Like I think that's what all these
like if we talked about this on off Michael earlier that Cathedral distilled it all so much that I didn't realize that it was a very liberal adaptation of
Vitus
and Trouble
and stuff like that. Yeah. And by the way, you love Scott more than Wino, correct?
Yes.
Well, I came across, you might know this issue since you did the cover.
I did the cover, yes.
Yeah, it's the top 100 doom metal albums of all time. And one esteemed friend of ours, namely Jeff Wagner, he wrote the little review, I got to find it, for St. Vitus, and in it...
For the first one.
For the first one, yep, from 1984. And he opens it up with this. Scott Regers is the greatest doom metal vocalist ever. There. I said it in print. Boom. So it's out there. I'm not saying I agree with it, but Wagner definitely
I would put him up there.
Sits in the corner, yeah.
Yeah.
I think largely what Regers does in like Psychopath and Burial at Sea, these opening kind of it's on. Like he's really doing some like really incredible stuff here. Burial at Sea to me is like really drawing from Volume 4. It's very monolithic. So the way Scott sings in this though too, I think is cool because it sounds like he's like warding off like evil at the beginning. It's got this like harrowing vibrato that he's sort of doing here.
Yeah, like he's performing a mass.
Yeah.
Instead like the way he's I mean it's like a performance art piece. Like come and look at me. Like you can picture his body movements, and if you look him up on Metallium, it's exactly what you'd expect.
Is it? Yeah.
He's like his eyes are bugged out, his hands are out.
That's awesome.
Like shit like Messiah would do,
Mm-hmm. And this had a big influence. I was like doing some research on Reverend Bizarre, the Finnish doom band.
Mm-hmm.
They took a lot from like the style that Scott does in like a song like Burial at Sea, like that vocal performance and some of those kind of things.
I think that the Scott era now is probably more influential to newer doom bands.
You think so?
Because people are like glomming onto that weird.
Do you think they've sort of cycled through the Wino stuff in the 90s and the early 2000s?
I think they're just
like
digging deeper. Yeah. Like they're just trying to pull in like the more weird reference. Like nobody gave a shit about, Sir Thungul until 15 years ago?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, as far as like a broad acceptance, like since the reunion, that's when people cared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's like that, oh shit, I think people are really drawn to that. People that have stuck with it for their entire life.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Mark Sheldon like did the same shit since the 70s. Died doing what he loved. Is like, you got to respect that.
Yeah.
That they could finally get that audience to finally come around.
To finally kind of catch up to what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to give credit to that. I think one of the cool things about Burial at Sea, too, I had some very specific notes for this song. I said, it's got this churning, repetitive riff for the opening 4 minutes that has so much provocation. I said it almost reminds me of the riff that Death Crush from Mayhem and early Celtic Frost has, but it's like slowed down, especially the things like Mark Adams is doing on bass.
Mm-hmm.
You know how like in the Aphalamia like cover of Death Crush, the way that the like bass is sort of being played where it sounds like it's so punk rock?
Yeah.
That's
being hit.
Yeah, just like the boom, 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 boom.
Bouncy.
Yeah, it's in this too. So like they can't shed their punk roots, and yet they're trying to do this volume 4. So it's like Sabbath and punk, and I mean the Melvins will do stuff like that too in their own bizarre way at the same time. I guess we could probably throw the Melvins in the same category, maybe with like Pentagram and Trouble, like bands that were out of time that were progenitors of like what came in the next decade. They maybe don't get the credit.
I don't think the
deserve.
Melvins were as out of time. I think they were so singular as a band that they kind of fit. They were just like,
and they were more plugged into the punk scene than anyone.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah, I would say.
You know, so maybe they were less out
like
of
they
time.
were oddballs, but people still respected them back then.
That's true. I don't know.
They weren't like so out of time. Like
I don't know if people were
sounded
spitting
like
at them at like Black Flag shows.
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
So.
Yeah, exactly. So then that tempo shift
that's a key thing that happens in most good Vitus songs.
It's
abrupt
crushes,
tempo
crushes, and that sci-fi ending, beautiful, so good. So I think you could take these 3 songs, and this is the template for almost all of St. Vitus right here.
Yeah.
The title track, Psychopath, Burial at Sea, boom. So let's get into it, and we got a little
double bass too.
What's that? Oh yeah,
title track, double bass toward the end there.
Yeah,
that's not something you really heard in doom music.
And I think that
Trouble you did.
Do you think that comes out of their roots from punk hardcore?
I think it comes from their love of New Album.
Okay, so you think it's more that, less
I
like
think
what they were hearing in like the hardcore
Priest
scene?
Yeah, because there's no double bass in hardcore.
That's true. There's fast stuff, but
there's fast, but there's never double bass.
Yeah.
That's why like the Repulsion blast beat was a single kick blast beat.
Yep. Yeah. So you think it's coming out of like Sin After Sin?
I think that's
drumming, Alan Moore on Sad Wings kind of stuff.
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, now that you say that. So, but yeah, we've got a treat. We reached out to Dave Chandler, and he recorded some answers. And basically what I kind of more or less asked him is I asked him to kind of reflect on the early history of the band a little bit. I asked him, to reflect on his 40 years in the scene a bit here in terms of what the debut album holds to him and the band and Doom and stuff like that. And so he was nice enough. And man, I tell you what, how excited were you when you first started getting these answers?
It was great.
I was I was overwhelmed.
It's only 7 minutes. It's like, okay, this is cool though. And the next one's like twice that, and the next one's twice that. I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool,
so
cool.
it was very cool. So this is
I was listening to Vitus as I was getting these popping over, and I would just turn the thing down and listen to them. So
that's fantastic.
Oh, sweet.
So we've got a nice treat from Dave Chandler, who contributed to the show. The only founding member that's still kind of consists. He's been in every.
Yeah, I mean, Mark's got Parkinson's disease now.
Yep, Mark's out.
Armando's dead.
Yep, Armando passed away.
So I mean, that's really kind of it. Wino's
been in and out. Scott's been in and out, and so Dave is the band. I mean, he's the guy that's writing all the music for the most part,
for kind of the whole run of the band, really.
Yep. So it was nice to have his perspective, because if you're going to trust anybody, trust Dave Chandler.
Yeah.
So we've got a little treat from Dave, and then we've got the eponymous St. Vitus, Psychopath, and Burial at Sea.
All right. So when we started in '79, punk rock was in LA, obviously, but it hadn't hit big yet. It didn't hit big for about a year, and hair metal hadn't started yet, thank God. But we still had a lot of problems getting booked in anywhere. No one would book us on a weekend because of what we played. Because most bands at the time, the normal hard rock bands or metal bands, whatever you want to call it, they played mostly covers with just 1 or 2 originals, if any. And that's what people going out wanted to see. So any band like us who played all originals, you were basically shooting yourself in the foot. Or if you only played a couple covers, they would book you on like midnight on a Thursday or some ridiculous thing. So it was like rough from the start. And then when punk rock hit, a lot of the clubs just flat out would not book anything other than punk rock because it was the big thing. And I don't blame them at all. And shortly after that was when hair metal hit. So any of the clubs that did not book punk rock, that booked metal, they didn't want to book us because we weren't playing that. And also that was around the same time as pay to play, which the hair bands loved. So they paid these people to play on the weekends and stuff, which we were not about to do. We sure as hell weren't going to pay anyone to play at, midnight on a Tuesday or something in their crappy club. So it was real difficult. And back then you couldn't really advertise your shows other than flyers because, or mailing lists, there was no internet thing. And we had a connection to punk rock because Scott Riegers was friends with Roger, from bass player from the Circle Jerks. And so we all went out to an Overkill show to pass out flyers, which is where we met them. SST was promoting them as their crossover band, and they wanted to do some metal shows. They were having kind of the same problems that we were. They were doing all originals for one thing. So we set up a show with them, and we asked them to bring Black Flag out, and they liked us, and that's what happened with that. So yeah, the scene was very difficult all the way around. And it wasn't called doom metal. We didn't even hear that term until the second time we went to Europe in 1989. All right, so the first album was obviously, it's a big thing because it's your first record, so it means a lot to me. That one, the first one, and Die Healing are my favorite Vitus albums, period, bar none. An interesting thing about the first one, which I've said a lot of times, that some people don't believe, I guess, but whatever, is it's basically a live album. It's a rehearsal recorded live. They put up baffles to separate us. They put Scotty way in a corner. A lot of the songs are one take. Not all of them are, of course, but it is live. The only thing we put in that would be called like an overdub or whatever are the backing vocals on Zombie Hunger and St. Vitus. Obviously, that wasn't live. But, I guess I like the second side because it's just two songs and it's, typical Vitus, but I guess my favorite songs probably would be those two, The Psychopath, Burial at Sea, and I really liked White Magic, Black Magic a lot. Which is really cool because that got picked up from a Netflix original movie called Small Crimes. If you all want to watch that, when the star is snorting drugs in the stripper's dressing room, if you listen closely, White Magic, Black Magic is the song that's playing on stage.
That was Burial at Sea, The Psychopath, Saint Vitus, and then we heard from Dave. Thank you, Dave. Hopefully we make you proud, Dave, because I'm sure he's going to check this episode out.
Hope so.
Yeah. In fact, near the end of this episode, I'll share some of the feedback we got on our 3-part 90s soundtrack episode. And we even heard back from some In Solitude guys. That was great. So we've got some good stuff, but I'll say that kind of towards the end a little bit, so that way for our newer fans or our exclusively Vitus people that are checking this out, I don't want to, overwhelm you with a bunch of letters and things like that. But it is cool that we got some good feedback from that. So then we kind of move into the sort of end of the original sort of Scott Reger's era with Hallow's Victims and then the Walking Dead EP. And I don't know, I guess in terms of differences, it's a year later. It's 85.
Yeah.
Faster tempos a little bit more.
It's kind of more blown out fuzz kind of sound.
I get some there's even some Iron Maidenisms on we're not playing White Stallions, but they're bringing a little bit more of some of that new album stuff in. Whether it was conscious or unconscious, I don't know if they were fans or not fans, but they seem to be at least increasing kind of the tempo and adding some of those kind of elements in terms of the drums and things like that.
Some White bounce happening.
Yeah, a little bit of that. White Stallions, I don't know if you picked up on this. It has some aspects of Back in the Village a little bit. It's so
I can see that.
It's kind of a weird kind of thing. And even I don't know. We're gonna get some things about more supernatural aspects. Mystic Lady. You got Burning Witches. You got some more psychedelic sort of elements that are starting to be kind of woven through. A song we're not going to play, The Sadist, mixes kind of punk and doom. Prayer for the Masses is again shows these this attitude I mentioned in the first Talkset where they're kind of addressing religion and Venom bands and stuff. So it seems like they're a little bit more, I don't want to say more focused. To me, there was more of a blank canvas with the debut, and this one they seem like they're kind of coming in with a little bit more intention to try some different ideas, and they have a little bit more confidence maybe because they have that first one behind them a bit. Kind of
make a little more, put a little more identity into singular identity into what they're figuring out what the hell they are. So
do you have I know you don't have the first one, but in listening to the stuff on Spotify, do you have a preference between Hallow's Victim era or the debut or not really?
I mean, they're all pretty similar as far, it's not grossly crazily different sounding. I like the production of Hallow's Victim. Mm-hmm. It's more raw,
more garagey almost. Yeah.
It almost sounds kind of more of a live performance or something. I like Scott's voice a little raw too. Mm-hmm. Cause he can do that, the false vibrato, but also some good, some good, semi guttural kind of shit too.
Sure. Yeah. I think War is Our Destiny, especially, which we're going to kick this next set off with. The one thing about Vitus is you might kind of complain that, or some people, naysayers might be their songs are too slow or they just kind of drag on, but
too simple.
But to me, this is an anthem. Yeah. This is anthemic. It's,
it's retardedly simple.
Yeah. It's Motorhead meets Tony Iommi. If he was playing in Motorhead,
slowing down a little bit.
Yeah, but just it's
just such a simple riff but I think that's why it works so well with Scotty is because he acts as a second guitar almost with what his dynamic range is doing.
That makes
sense.
And
Armando sounds like he's not doing a whole lot, but he's doing way more than you think. It's harder than fuck to play that speed.
In Wars Our Destiny.
And to have swing to it.
I just wrote, there's these cool little percussive flares that Armando does. I said that slay big time. He's kind of an MV. Him and Mark Adams, and even the new rhythm section. We'll talk about this more in part 2. The rhythm section is so fucking on point for these guys through most of their career.
Yeah, the new one's really good. But they're definitely more seasoned players.
Yeah,
but I like what these
guys
the
are
original,
almost don't know what they're doing.
Yes, yeah. But they fill out. They're nobody's stepping on anybody's toes as far as sonic frequencies go. Dave plays the riff, Mark's playing around the riff.
Yep.
And then Armando's just kind of swinging, and then Scott's going wherever the fuck he wants.
It does have a looser, I don't want to say improvisational, but it has
it sounds like it's being played live.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like a studio polish kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I don't know, us coming out of like the garage scene a little bit from Detroit, like that aesthetic, I think is very appealing to people like you and I.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
You know? And so, not that I don't like a good polish, because I do, you know. I unapologetically like things like Queensryche and shit like that sometimes. Sure. You know what I mean? So like I have that side of me as well, but like when it's done right, like Vitus does it,
yeah,
that's fucking spot on. You know, Mystic Lady, which we're going to hear after Wars or Destiny, like to me this song is interesting. It kind of plays with this formula that the debut had, those songs we heard, Psychopath and Burial Sea. And so it's got that glacial doom in the first half, and then that up-tempo sort of second half, you know?
That second half, it predicted 90% of the 90s stoner boom. Yep. Every Fu Manchu record is that right there.
Yeah. No, there's a ton of it.
And that's Southern California too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. California Crossin', I think is one of the albums there. And I just, you know, I really dig this one because in addition to like the Sabbath sort of tritone type stuff, like this is the Fu Manchu part, you know, it's got this psychedelic kind of flair that's sort of built into the DNA of the song. Mm-hmm. I also thought like Dave and his solos and stuff in this song is really evoking like that kind of Ritchie Blackmore kind of like lift that you hear at the end of like Smoke in the Water.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 that like bright like lift. Like Iommi never really did that. You know what I mean? Iommi was doing like these sort of darker, kind of doomier tritones, but like there's like a brightness, that California sun psychedelic kind of thing that like Dave just like sprinkles into what he's doing.
I think, yeah, I mean, that's the difference between how Sabbath plays and how Blue Cheer plays.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's Blue like, Cheer is a California band.
Yeah,
Sabbath's
like it's so
industrial,
evident.
gloomy.
They're both real heavy.
Yep.
But like one is automatically playing a little brighter just because, hey man, it's always kind of cool here. It's all the same.
For sure.
We're not getting bombed on and having to, you know, suck in soot so much.
Yeah. So I hear some Deep Purple inside the solo a little bit, you know, and it's another classic solo. I mean, I think Dave's underreported his solo work.
What his solos remind me of is this something I was stoned yesterday writing notes about this. So, you know, while doing Vitus, you know, you should probably imbibe a little bit.
Yeah, there you go.
Or helps things.
Yeah.
But I was like, these guys are like the anti-Slayer. As far as like they're almost like dive bombs that he's doing. And then it's just all Slayer music is so fucking simple, but it's played fast and precise. This is super simple, played slow.
So you think
and
it's
precise.
Anti-Slayer, or you think it's the Doom Slayer?
It's like the Bizarro Slayer.
Okay.
Like they're complete polar opposite.
In terms of like velocity, but yet the approach is the same.
Their approach is the same, but their speed is, and subject matter is different.
And they're both coming out of LA, and they're both coming out of punk roots.
Yeah.
And Nawabum.
I think there's more there.
It's fascinating.
To be mined.
Tom's got great hair. Dave's got great hair.
I could do paper on this, college paper.
Dave's got, you know, does Tom wear headbands? I don't know.
I've never seen him do it.
Yeah. Although Carrie's iconically no hair, Dave's got iconic hair with headbands. So I don't know. There's the bizarro, you know, mirror versions of each other or something.
Yeah, I don't know where Jeff Hanneman falls into this whole thing, but
it gets complicated because you got the two guitar players.
Oh, Wino
brings the guitar in at a certain point. Yeah, exactly. And then we get Hallow's Victim, and this is one of my favorite tunes from them as well. And I think like Armando is great in this. He does this stutter delay thing with the drums. That's
time bit at the end.
Fucking glorious.
Yeah.
And to me, what I can hear in those parts with the drums and Hallow's Victims is he's kind of laying the foundation for Queens of the Stone Age. Like a lot of the stuff. I said on
a couple other songs too.
Yeah. Like you remember how at the like
because they were taking the desert rock and distilling that even more.
Yes.
So that's the original, you know, kind of entry point. That makes a lot of sense.
And that's kind of what I hear here. I mean, it's just supercharged. It's got some speed going a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Hallow's Victim. It's one of the faster songs that they
there's some Voivod isms as far as the tempo is concerned. I
And think too, like I don't know if Dave ever mentioned this in any of the clips that we'll sort of play in terms of were there punk bands at that time that like because they were in that realm that were inspiring them in terms of speed and things like that, or if they were just taking speed from Nawabum, and you know, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're always hanging out with those bands, something might kind of rub off at a certain point. It's hard to say, but
second half of My War, man, that's nice and slow.
I know.
Dirgy.
I know. And I think think My War came out after the debut from Vitus. So I think
you're right.
Vitus beat them to the SST to the punch for having like the first like slow, doomy kind of thing, you know. Around the same time that they're recording Hallow's Victims, they're also recording The Walking Dead, and it was released alongside the 4 tunes came out alongside like a weird comp that SST put out that also had like Black Flag, the aforementioned like LA Overkill.
Is that the Heavier Than Thou one, or is this a different one?
No, this is the Heavier Than Thou is just like a greatest hits, but the Walking Dead EP originally came out as part of a collection that SST put out with Black Flag, with like SWA, DC3, Overkill was on there, and then some band called Worm, WURM, and stuff. And I think in a lot of ways, like I've listened to that like EP, and we're gonna play like the title track off of it. And to me, like they were maybe because they knew they were recording it for like a punk sampler. To me, this is like the closest they are to like going back to like their punk roots in sort of a weird sense.
Until a little later on.
Until a little bit later on, yeah. Even if that is kind of like an uphill battle is what I wrote.
Yeah.
And the tour that follows after they put out Hallow's Victim and The Walking Dead, there's this rest stop incident, and I'll mention it, and then we can kind of go into the music.
George Michael, or?
No. Like Scott was already kind of on the fence with being part of the band.
Yeah.
And they fell asleep. They slept in a rest stop, and then apparently, like right before they sort of got up, Scott got up and went in the rest stop and pissed. Mm-hmm. And the manager of the tour didn't like everybody else was sleeping, so he just assumed everybody was there, and they left. And they left Scott like at a rest stop. And I think that was like the cherry on top of like some of his decision making of like, did he want to do this kind of lifestyle for the rest of his life and some of that kind of stuff. And so it's around that time that I think that's when he begins kind of talking to like Wino about, hey, I'm going to probably be leaving this band. I want to find a replacement. And so the Walking Dead tour that follows like that and Hallow's Victim kind of represents the sort of end of the road with like kind of them and Scott. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we sort of come back. But so we've got War is Our Destiny, Mystic Lady, and Hallow's Victim from Hallow's Victim, and then the title track from the Walking Dead EP.
We had most of the songs for Hallow's Victim and The Walking Dead already done. We'd already been performing them for years. And as a matter of fact, on the first recording session, we recorded The Sadist and White Stallions. But all of those songs were too much to put on a vinyl record at the time. If you compressed it too much, it sounded like crap. So SST really wanted to push the slow songs, so they said that they would save White Stallions and The Sadist for later, which will just bring me to Hallow's Victim and The Walking Dead. Those recorded were exactly the same way as the first album. There was a couple little tweaks that Spot had us do, like maybe hit a chord here or there, but I don't really think there were any real overdubs. It was pretty much, done the way the first one was. It was the same studio. We just went in and we had all of the songs done, and we were performing them with the exception of Hallow's Victim and Prayer for the Masses. We wrote both of those for that record. We never really played Prayer for the Masses live much after that, because every time we played that, there was some kind of a problem, usually a giant fight in the crowd, and it was just ridiculous, so we stopped playing it. And Hallow's Victim wasn't even thought of to be on the record, but it was written because there were rumors plus articles in magazines saying that St. Vitus plays slow because they cannot play fast. And I was like, well, no, screw that. Bullshit. I'm going to write a song that's faster than anything out now. Now, you got to remember, this is pre-thrash, pre-speed metal, any of that crap. The fastest bands out at the time were Venom and Motorhead, and that song was faster than any song that they were doing at that time, which is why that was written. I named the album Hallow's Victim basically after Scotty, because he was born on Halloween. And The Walking Dead, that was another thing that it was not enough to make an album, but couldn't be put on with Hallow's Victim. The Walking Dead is 11 minutes long. And Darkness is a pretty long song too. That was our like solo song live. So they put those two on the Walking Dead EP, and I don't know why they put White Stallions on it again, because I always thought they should have put Look Behind You, which was recorded with the Hallow's Victim album. That was the first song we ever learned together, but instead they wanted to save that for the Blasting Concept 2 record. So I found that, okay, well then why don't you just do The Walking Dead in Darkness? But they said that wasn't enough, so they popped White Stallions on, probably because that was the punkiest song we had at the time outside of Hallow's Victim. And I know that a couple of the SST bigwigs really liked that one.
Hold your breath, baby, we're roaming here tonight.
that was the epic Walking Dead, Hallow's Victim, Mystic Lady, and we started with War is Our Destiny.
That's what it's for.
It is, yeah. Walking Dead, we didn't prepare you for that one. We just kind of threw that one at you. You didn't know you were getting a 11-minute and 44-minute dirge of just utter depressing, miserable, lovely doom. I mean, and miserable, I mean that in like the most endearing word. It's just like, it is like the encapsulation of like when somebody tries to describe like, why do you listen to doom metal? It's to feel this way.
It's like, it's like listening to any type of like, you know, like Wagner, anything where it feels big.
Yeah.
Like bigger than just you know.
Those open notes, just like empty space, you know, like there's not singing for the first 2.5 minutes. You know what I mean? Like
it's so simple or deceptively simple. I think the riff sounds incredibly simple, but what makes it heavy is the open spaces.
That's
in that whole thing. And then when Scott comes in and he's doing this operatic vibrato thing, it's like, fuck man, that's it.
I mean, Scott's kind of like off the rails here in a cool way. Like he just there's like no rules. He's just sort of like freestyling. Almost.
He makes really weird decisions in the best possible way.
Yeah. And I compare
like when
that.
Says like when the what was it, the grave gate opens or something. That's not how anybody else would phrase that.
Yeah.
Open. Like
it's just totally wild.
That's great.
And I just said it's had to have inspired somebody like Lee Dorian with some of the weird vocal choices he'll make, like especially when you get to like Ethereal Mirror and beyond, where he starts really opening things up in the mid-90s.
Supernova.
Yeah, like you can almost picture like Scott singing that like that weird, like what the fuck. And I just said the whole song is an apocalyptic journey into cool horror themes with depressive, miserable riffing.
I think the vibrato that Dorian did in like Force of Equilibrium, that whoa, is like the anti-Scott.
Yep.
Because he couldn't do the high shit, so he does the low stuff.
Absolutely.
Fits in with that whole, you know, hammer horror aesthetic thing too.
It's hard to imagine this song in front of a punk audience.
Well, they got spit on a lot.
I know. and that's where like you hear that song and you develop such empathy for like what they had to have gone through.
And they kept doing it.
A 12-minute song in front of like an audience of just punk people.
That's like a whole set for a band.
It takes balls.
Yeah. I mean, that's what endeared Greg Ginn to him, I think, to keep him on the label too. It's just like, fuck, these guys they're doing
do not give a shit.
Yeah.
They are in it for them.
They love it.
Yeah, they're in it for the love. Now at the end of that song, those last like 2 or 3 minutes, actually more like 4 minutes, you know, Dave's guitar from about 7 minutes on, like, and it happens a couple times. I mean, it's funny because I wrote it down and you wrote it down and we didn't really talk to each other about it.
Oh yeah.
Perhaps you as Requiem Metal podcast fans know that Mark and I are big fans of the Peaceful 3, as they call.
Yeah.
And I would even call it the accidental Peaceful 4 because I'll throw like Catatonia in there as like kind of a attached. But Paradise Lost, Gregor McIntosh, his guitar playing had to have taken something.
They either had the same ideas or, you know, not all ideas are taken from other people, but like people that are doing miserable songs, this is like the best way to do the leads.
Yeah.
Like it cuts through and it makes it like even reinforces the more miserable parts of the main riff.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever hear Paradise Lost talk about these guys?
Never. No.
I looked through the book just to see if I could find any references. I couldn't find any.
I mean, I have the thing is like when you're dealing with emails with musicians, they tend to change them a lot because people over bombard them with shit.
Yeah.
I did send an email out to Tampa because he has a Vitus tattoo. The newest video, he's got a fucking St. Vitus ring on.
No shit.
Yeah. So the email address I had, because he did an intro to one of my books. So I emailed him to see if he had something to say. I was like, obviously you think this band is pretty amazing. But yeah, they're right in the middle of whatever. So
yeah, probably
But I was like, that's the guy. It was just like late night writing down notes. I was like, oh shit, he's got that fucking Vitus tattoo.
He'd be the guy to talk to. Yeah.
And then I watched that new video a couple days ago for, I forget what it's called.
Spectre something.
The Spectre of Oblivion or what, I don't know what it is. But
it's a great song.
Yeah, but when he's got his hands up like by his face, he's got a fucking St. Vitus ring.
Mm-hmm. That's funny.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I'd love to hear like Gregor's thoughts on some of this kind of stuff. Like
they never really talk about those. They've talked about Trouble before.
Yeah.
But then they usually they bring in like the more like what I would assume was like, you know, the Cults and like those types of bands, guitar playing more so, which I guess it's more evident. But like, holy shit! Like I heard it so many times in a lot of these records.
Yeah. Just that song alone. To me, that was the most obvious maybe of the songs that we sort of heard. But
there's one later on too that has a pretty good one.
I remember writing it a couple times, but so now we get into Born Too Late, and luckily we have some kind of different. We have a Decibel Hall of Fame that kind of talked about this album, and it also
I didn't realize they did that. I forgot.
Yeah,
I didn't look at it all.
It was also featured in the Doom at Metal albums top 100 of all time, number 10. So it cracks the top 10. So there's some cool quotes and different things.
What was the top 10? I forgot, and I'm just curious now to put the show in context of
So there you
Decibel.
go. So we got Vitus, number 10, Born Too Late.
Okay.
Thurgothan, Stream from the Heavens, number 9.
Okay.
Electric Wizard, Dope Throne, 8.
Mm-hmm.
Pentagram, Relentless, at 7. Paradise Lost, Gothic, at 6.
Okay.
Trouble, Trouble, Solemn 9, at number 5.
All right.
Masters of Reality, Black Sabbath, number 4. Force of Equilibrium, Cathedral, number 3. Candlemass, Epicus, Doomicus, Metallicus, number 2. And Black Sabbath, number 1.
It's pretty good. I think I would have. I mean, I love Cathedral, but in a historical context, I would have pushed them back a little bit because they're more. I guess Force is its own thing, though.
It's its own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I might have moved Vitus ahead of Wizard.
Yeah.
And Thurgothan, probably. I mean, I know that like Funeral Doom is really important to some people. It's not as important to me.
Not to me, but
I get it. It's like it's its own like whole thing.
Sure.
You know. But yeah. So
it's good.
It's interesting. Yeah. But in the Hall of Fame, they obviously talk about, you know, how does Wino join the band? How does Scott sort of leave? And they talk to the guy who produced. I don't know if he produced all the Vitus records. He certainly produces the Born Too Late.
I think he did all the SST records.
The Carducci, Joe Carducci. Okay,
because I think he was part of SST.
He was like a guy.
He might have been like part of
almost like Bill Meteor was like part of like Metal Blade. He did like a lot of Metal Blade.
I think something
in-house
like that.
Guy or something.
I could be wrong, but that sounds super familiar from what I was reading.
Yeah. Yep. So they talk about Carducci says Dave brought me the Obsessed tape into SST and played it for me. He said they'd met this guy in the East Coast and they were thinking about bringing him in as a singer. It was hard for me to picture though. Even when Scott Riegers left, I thought, oh, they'll never get anyone that good. So I wasn't immediately blown away by Wino. I liked what the Obsessed were doing, but I didn't get hooked on it until years later. When I finally saw Wino do some gigs with Vitus, I thought, yeah, this will be good. And then Wino said, I just missed the St. Vitus tour. I just missed St. Vitus touring with Black Flag. When Henry Rollins joined Flag, Vitus went out with them on a few major tours. And back then, St. Vitus were pretty much considered Spinal Tap all the way. So I missed a lot of the getting trashed and getting spit on phase, although I did have a few experiences like that. He says, we were on SST, so we would always get asked to fill in on these hardcore shows when an SST band would drop off. So he kind of talks a little bit about that, playing with Agnostic and stuff. That's like him once he joins the band. But yeah, so it was essentially Scott kind of like replaced Wino with him. Like he knew he was leaving, so he was the one that sought out Wino to like join the band again and stuff.
Yeah, and he's from DC, you know, close to where Bobby Liebling's at, so there's something in the water there.
Yeah. They said so here's the Mark Adams story. He goes, when we were on our way to Maryland to do a show, we accidentally left Scotty at a rest stop. Dave got out to call the promoter to get directions to the club while we were asleep, and I guess Scotty got up and went to the bathroom. He left without telling anyone, and Dave got back in the van without doing a head count because he figured we were all still asleep. I guess Scotty was there all by himself for about 10 minutes before the police came through and wanted to know what he was doing there without a vehicle. They threatened to arrest him, but somehow he got a ride out of there. And he says he was already thinking about quitting at that point, but when we left him at the rest stop, that really ticked him off. We picked him up at a bus station in Maryland somewhere. We did 2 or 3 more shows after that, and then we dropped him off at a bus station in Indianapolis, and we finished the tour as a 3-piece with Dave singing. So,
as would happen a couple times.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. But basically Wino says, he says, I met them and I was helping them slam their gear back in the van. They didn't have any money, so I gave them $20 for gas. He says, that's when
a lot back then.
Yeah, I know. That's when Riegers asked me if I'd replace him, but it wasn't that easy because he wasn't the man. Dave was the man. At the time, I was still coming out of my obsessed death glam phase, and I still had this kind of bombed out hair. And Dave said I look like a expletive. But I was really determined to join the band, so I wouldn't take no for an answer. A few weeks later, I was standing outside, and a V of geese flew across the full moon. And I was like, that's it, man. That's the omen. I called them and told them I was coming out. That was the winter, early 86.
Nice.
So now we got Wino in the band. I guess, obviously we started the whole show off with Born Too Late, but what's the clearest difference for you in terms of like what Wino either brings to the band that's kind of different?
I think he makes them more commercially appealing.
Okay.
I think it makes everything more consistent. He's less flamboyant. He's kind of more of a straightforward rock singer, really. It brings a totally different vibe. I think that it actually focuses the vibe more on the music.
Yeah.
Than on the whole presentation. Like with Scott there, it would be
the
music's heavy, but that would like take you to another level. I think like Wino's just reinforcing the music more with his vocal delivery.
Yeah, to me, now it falls a little bit more into a more traditional songwriting kind of approach for a while.
I think it is more
like what Sabbath and some of those bands were kind of doing.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of works in its favor.
I think Born Too Late is it's so simple that I think I said it before, borderline's cliche, but nobody else had done it before.
But it is the cliche.
It is the cliche.
Yep.
You can't think that there could be a super heavy like pop song. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how these are all set up. Fairly short. A lot of them, there's not the Sabbath isms quite so much. There's the biggest thing is like the tempo changes. Mm-hmm. Like they usually have a couple of those per song that kind of out of nowhere, it automatically they get bored of the riff and like, all right, let's go on to something different.
Kind of move. Yeah. I mean, I think like what's also cool, I think it's something that people forget is the lyrics on this album kind of become, for the first time, it's really semi-autobiographical. And I think that
these are all Dave too, right?
Later. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got Dying Inside, which is about alcoholism. You've got Clear Windowpane about acid trips that he took. And the acid is actually called Sweet Clear Windowpane.
That record is the first one of theirs that the lyrics really stood out.
Yes, and that's, to me, I think it's important. I mean, Lost Feeling is about Dave's descent into depression.
Yeah.
And then the whole philosophy of the whole fucking band is the title track. So in a way, it's like it's their Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
Like Black Sabbath, I remember Malcolm Dome, who's a British journalist. I think he writes for some stuff, but he's a talking head in a lot of things too. And he talks about how, like, in the song Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath is the entire heavy metal genre. Mm-hmm. Just like whether it's the tritone, whether it's the atmosphere, whether it's the caterwauling vocals, whether it's the tempo shift, like everything, it writes itself. And in a lot of ways, like a song like Born Too Late and this album is the template for like the cliches that are going to kind of come later.
Yeah, I think it's so distilled from Sabbath that it's hard to really even appreciate it unless you're kind of a seasoned listener.
Yeah. No, I'm
sure you can appreciate it, but like I think you can really appreciate it. Listen to this like rock and roll for 35, 40 years.
I think Vitus, to me it's aged and I've aged, and I think it's like
I've aged into them more.
Yes, I think I understand them more. Same with Trouble too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think those two bands, like, and like I said, maybe the people they appealed to were people that either were like younger people that just had an older aesthetic, and weren't into thrash and weren't into like the flashiness of what was sort of going on at the time.
Yeah.
Like you have to really consciously have been like against almost every single musical trend to like be into this. Yeah. Or somebody that never let go of the 70s and was like an older listener. And I just don't imagine those people running into this pre-internet on SST records that much.
Yeah.
You're not going to like accidentally, it's not like they were being picked to like open up Sabbath shows.
No,
which would have been perfect for them, right?
Absolutely.
To play to that audience. They were they were playing with Black Flag, so like you're not going to get like what Steve talked about in Neurosis with like the person in the back. Yeah, like maybe you'll get a couple, but it's not. It's going to be few and far between. I think sometimes. You know?
Yeah, I don't think Vitus played a whole lot of them. I mean, in the last 20 years, they might have opened for some larger, for like Down or something.
Yeah, and I think playing some like festivals, like playing Wacken and things like that. Yeah, you know. And this is another one. You know, Dave throughout our interviews will comment a lot on the album covers and stuff like that. And, you know, they kind of talk about like the album and what's sort of going on. If you don't know the Born Too Late album, I mean, how would you describe this cover?
Pink?
It's the pink.
And it has like a little stained glass window in it.
Yeah, and the window was how tiny would you say? What percentage of the album cover do you think that window kind of makes up if you're kind of trying to...
I think it's even smaller on the LP.
Like 15% of like the whole pink background?
I'd say 5. 5? 5%.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little stained glass cross.
Yeah. And speaking of Spinal Tap, this is very much like almost like the Spinal Tap Stonehenge kind of incident, you know, with the album cover.
Those are inches, not feet.
Yeah. Oh, God. So basically, they ask him, what's the story with the album cover? And Mark says, well, it didn't come out right. It was supposed to be a different color, and the window was supposed to be almost the size of the album cover. So when you're looking at the album, it was like you were looking into the window with maybe 1.5 inches of purple border around it. The thing is, the test pressing the SST showed us looked fine, but when the album cover actually came out in print, it didn't look that way at all. Somebody had goofed and sent the wrong thing to the printer, and we couldn't do anything about it at that point because all the covers were all printed up, but it wasn't what it was supposed to be. Acosta says, Dave was kind of upset because the cross was supposed to be bigger. The SST photographer, Naomi Peterson, had photographed it in Europe, and his idea of the album cover was that the cross should be way bigger. SST never fixed it because they were always trying to cut corners in any way they could.
Well, think back with if you a little bit of technical know-how with how this cover would have been put together back in the day, is that you would have taken a piece of paper, usually something that was ruled out, and then you would show quadrants of where, you know, the St. Vitus logo is supposed to go, and you'd show like where that's supposed to be on like a graph paper.
Yeah.
And it's you have a set of films that would be basically like a transparency for the logo. Mm-hmm. Probably have a slide for the little photo where that's supposed to go, and like a PMS color out of a big book that told you what the cover was supposed to be. If it was one number off, it could be completely different. So it was way different than people think, like, you know, WYSIWYG kind of shit. This was all like, here's the font we want for Born Too Late, and it's going to be in this area over here, and you never knew exactly what you were going to get
until it came out.
Yeah. This is, I mean, even in the 90s it was that way until like 97 is the first time I actually sent full discs when I was working at Relapse to the company, instead of sending them like, here's the slides and here's the fonts.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think of like early Eclipse versus like later Eclipse even, and a lot changed kind of in that era. Here's Dave. Yeah, it's not supposed to look like that cutout that's glued to like a piece of paper. When we got it, we were like, what the fuck happened? I designed all of our album covers, and all our album covers are not what I designed. Not a single one. The back cover was fucked up too. You know how you take a bunch of pictures and they give you one of those proof sheets? We took a proof sheet from a live show that we did, made 3 or 4 copies of it, and cut the pictures out into strips. My idea was to just drop them on the ground and take a picture, so some would be overlapping others, some would be upside down, things like that. When we got the finished copies of Born Too Late, the front was nothing like how I wanted it, and the back had the pictures, but they were all perfectly aligned in exact order. And the back was even more pink than the front. It was supposed to be purple. So, there you go, Dave.
Yours has the Thirsty and Miserable cover on the back.
Is that? Yeah, it doesn't even have the mess up. I do have the vinyl upstairs on it. I'm kind of curious what that looks like on the back.
Yeah, I wasn't paying attention to the back of it. But.
Yeah. So then we get a trio of tunes that we're going to hear from Born Too Late. So let's kind of talk a little bit about those. Clear Windowpane, heavy, melodic, catchy.
It's the wah, the
yeah, that's definitely the wah. I think it sits next to, I said, Free Country and Sweetleaf as a drug-induced doom template. Those are sort of like the 3 drug anthems of doom metal at this point, you know.
I put very geezer lyrics.
Whiskey-soaked vocals. I think you hear that
psychological torment is kind of seems to be the the idea on this record.
Yep.
And it comes through in a really, none of the lyrics, even though they're like, very kind of on the nose, they sound truthful.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. Yep. Flange guitar, which you kind of a little bit of that going on, which I think Monster Magnet probably used the flange the best, and maybe Fu Manchu and Nebula in the 90s and beyond.
Kirk Hammett, man. All of his solos.
That's true. I'm thinking in like a Doom capacity.
Yeah.
Hendrix guitar tones. I think Hendrix was a really big inspiration for Dave. I mean, I know he was also a fan of like Alice Cooper and Blue Oyster Cult and some of that kind of stuff. But, I know who it was. Armando was a big fan of Rush.
That's right.
Yeah,
I did see something about that.
That's what
Neil
it was.
Peart was his favorite drummer.
Yep, I knew Mark was into Skinner, all the stuff Dave was into, but yeah, it was Rush was the band I couldn't remember from before. And ultimately, to me, this maybe is the most Blue Cheer of like their songs. This is like Blue Cheer personified.
It's right up there. Yeah.
Then we get Dying Inside and very poignant lyrics.
Losing all my
addiction.
friends and lovers, man.
Yeah. I can't control my addiction. I've tried time and time again. I've lost everything, and I really don't care. I'm dying inside.
Yeah, it was alcohol is one. It's what is it? That was so ingrained in my head for
alcohol.
Like I remembered all the lyrics in this album so much more than anything else. It was weird how
iconic they kind of become.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. What's he say?
Oh, alcohol's gonna win or something.
Yep. I'm losing all my friends and lovers. Alcohol knows it's going to win.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Dave wrote all that for sure. I think the thing that's interesting about this, if you're like kind of looking at like kind of doom and gloom and maybe for Wino especially because of the journey he went on as an addict, to me like that kind of I'm dying inside. This song kind of serves it does what like Forever Failure for Paradise Lost does. It's the like representation of everything the band stands for. Mm-hmm. Forever Failure.
Yeah.
Dying inside. This is it. This is like, I don't care what era of Vitus you're talking about. On some level, they're capturing the sentiment of a song like this.
Yeah.
Whether it's depression, whether it's anger, whether it's addiction, whatever it is, it's
all melancholy.
It's all here. It's kind of like their crest, if you will. So I thought that was kind of really interesting. Dave wrote this on a really bad hangover. Is when he wrote the song, like when they were on tour. Yep. So,
I put that it's kind of like the skeleton for early I Hate God. As far as like the lyric content and how it sounds.
Yes, I could kind of see that indeed. Yeah, no, you're right. Like, cause they're very like conscious of like addiction and conscious of like the like downward spiral into like, the plummet into doom kind of thing. You never feel
like
good.
The mess you are as a human being.
Yeah.
But
sloppy.
Somehow they make it okay.
Yeah, exactly. So he's writing this in the head frame of like hating himself for the hangover he's got, I love how open that riff is at the beginning. I said it's to me really reminiscent of like what like Wizard and the Melvins and those kind of bands will really use later, that sort of like lingering like just like letting it just kind of like hit you and stuff. So yeah, I thought Dying Inside it's one of my favorites from this record indeed. And then we get to a really interesting tune, I think, Lost Feeling.
The Depression song.
Yeah. It's got that Hand of Doom kind of quiet shuffle sort of at the beginning.
Just when you think you're happy, I come around.
Yeah.
Like I remembered the lyrics in these things. I'm actually writing them down. I was like, what's fucking wrong with me, man?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm dying inside and have that lost feeling. Who knows?
I think you're just a place of reflection at this point in your life,
That's probably true. I'm crying at long distance phone call commercials.
I kind of dig the kind of Alice Cooper, King Diamond, like kind of whispered vocals that Wino does throughout too. There's a lot of that sort of quiet, loud kind of dynamic going on.
Another hell of a fucking PL riff in this one too.
Here's what I wrote. I love the noisy solo. It reminds me of something Macintosh will do on Shades of God and maybe even Daniel on Serenades.
Yeah. See?
Yep. So great minds think alike, Mark. That's what I've heard, at least.
Well, Paradise Lost is in my top 5 of all time.
They're
always on my
pretty
mind,
high.
it seems
like. Anathema, Catatonia, Paradise Lost, those bands are kind of like...
If I'm listening to anything old, I was like, ooh, maybe they would have listened to that. Mm-hmm. I wonder if Greg liked Roxy Music. I don't know. So
a couple of interesting things before we sort of cut out of Born Too Late and kind of go to some music here is Wino sort of talks about this record a little bit, and he says... kind of why this record has like kind of a lasting legacy, I suppose. And he says it appeals to people of all walks of life. It is protest music, outlaw music, music for the times, slow, angry, bleak, and primitive. Because it's slower and simpler, it also clicks with someone who is just trying to let the music take them for a ride. Just like the person who uses drugs or substances to leave or change reality, it takes the edge off or comments on life, which can be a challenge. I thought that was a really...
It's a pretty profound
statement. Yeah, I thought it was a really cool thing.
Him saying that makes this this album has more probably in common with like a fucking Johnny Cash record.
Oh, sure.
than it does Sabbath in some aspects. You know, it's got like the singer-songwriter outlaw country kind of vibe almost going on as far as like the theme, like how it feels.
Like Willie Nelson, Hank Sr. Yeah, some of that. Waylon Jennings.
Yeah,
sure.
like the same emotional kind of content.
And that's like the bluesy qualities too in Wino. It's like a gunslinger music or something like that. You know?
Old ballads.
Yeah, he says, Wino, this is another kind of thing he kind of said about this era. He said, this music filled a void, a special place where folks were tired of thrash, tired of glam or punk, and we filled that space. So Dave kind of steps in right at that point. He says, at the time of this release, there were probably no other albums out there like that, especially the punk scene that we were in. Which, we've already kind of stayed at that point, but I think it's
pretty singular.
Yeah, it's pretty singular. This sort of, this got them kind of, I think this got them a little bit more attention, I
think so too. I think it got them more of like punk people would actually give it a first look because it's on SST.
For sure.
Like, what the fuck is this? Let's at least give it a try instead of just being on some rando label that nobody'd ever hear it.
Yeah.
That probably definitely helped them.
So let's get into it. We're going to hear from Dave again. He's going to kind of comment on like kind of the joining of Wino and some of that. And then we're going to get into Clear Windowpane, Dying Inside, and then Lost Feeling from Born Too Late.
Okay, the lasting legacy, I guess, of the first two records would be, like with most bands, the first couple records or whatever you do are usually the best because you're young, you're hungry, you don't know what you're doing. You don't try to make stupid decisions because you're all arrogant and thinking that you're all high and a rock star and shit like that. So it usually comes from the heart, usually are the best. And as far as Scott's impact on the early years of the band, he was one of the things that made people look at us because he has a unique voice. To this day, I've never heard anyone that sounds like him. And he had a really good stage presence at the beginning when we were all young and could run around and not die from running around. So that's why I think that he could always come and go at any time and people accept him because he is completely unique. Born Too Late. Yeah, put that on the podcast. Born Too Late is when we did that, now it's considered the high water mark. It is considered our biggest selling album, which it is, and the classic or whatever you want to say. At the time, though, it didn't sell any more than anything else. And again, all those songs were written before Wino joined. We had performed songs like Born Too Late, Hag, things like that with Scott. I think the only songs that I wrote for Born Too Late after Scotty left or that Scotty never actually performed are probably Dying Inside and The Lost Feeling. I actually think Scotty performed War Starter a few times. That album is like, I guess if you could say it holds a special place because it is the one that everyone says is the best. But it also does have like, it sticks in my craw because the album cover is ridiculous. But we're not going to get into that because that would be in something for a long interview. But it wasn't supposed to be pink. That's for damn sure. I'm glad it is now because that really makes it stick out. We did some pink shirts one time, and those were fantastic. As Wino entering the mix, he was not playing guitar at the time. He was never expected to, and he knew that. He added a whole new vibe to it because he's not a singer, he's a vocalist. So that added something a bit different, just straight out. And I think that kind of connected with, because some people were thrown off a bit by Scotty's weird voice. I thought it was great. So I think the fact that Wino was a simple vocalist that, almost like a Lemmy. I think that's what really connected him with people because, he was just there and he wasn't like pretentious at that time or anything like that. He didn't really, everything was done. So he didn't get a chance to put his influence in that. Even if he had wanted to, he was like, here, join this band that's already done, or don't join this band. That's up to you. We'll take you if you want to, but if you don't want to, that's not a big deal. We'll find somebody else. That's what our attitude was. So, that's just how that was. And when we did Born Too Late, we also at the same time did the Thirsty and Miserable EP, which the reason Look Behind You is on that is because you could only find that on the Blasting Concept with Scotty, and I wanted it on St. Vitus release. So, and it's kind of cool because then you can hear Wino's version of it, which is, that went over, he really did that song good. That went over live very well. There was a couple old songs that just were a bit out of his range, shall we say. As far as the album title being prophetic or anything, the reason I wrote that is because, I always said we were technically born too late. If we were like the same age in 1969 and done our first show then, I think we would have been a lot popular than we ever got, ever. Because even the very late 60s it was way easier for a band that sounded different to be popular, as for the 70s it got hard, and then the 80s and the 90s you had to sound like exactly like every single solitary thing else or no one would like you, which is complete bullshit. Thank you, MTV, suck my ass. The Thirsty and Miserable is really the only cover that Vitus ever did. When we first started, we used to do Judas Priest Cheater, but we only did that at parties and stuff, and maybe a local show when we very first started. And the reason we were able to actually record Thirsty and Miserable is because Greg Ginn didn't write that. Des Cadena did. So even though it's a Black Flag song, Greg could not stop us from recording it. And Des really loved that, and so did we. And so did some others at SST. Okay, now, Mournful Cries is definitely overlooked. That is a strange album for me because I really did not want the two guitar songs, but also I wanted to give Wino a chance to try it because maybe it would help with our record sales, which were miserable. They always were, and I thought, well, you never know, and of course it didn't. But a lot of people liked his songs, and a lot of people didn't. We got a lot of heat for it at the time because his songs were not simple like mine. And also, we did that a bit different. Like on Born Too Late was the first time we actually added rhythm guitar and, a little bit of guitar lead overdubs. Mournful Cries, we went to a completely different studio with someone completely, Joe Carducci was there, but the engineer was a guy named Casey. And he was really good, but it was at a fancy studio in Hollyweird on Melrose. And, it was the first time we did isolation booths. And it was really a bit different. And then I was also trying new ideas to try and get, like some kind of popularity, at least get on an underground radio. But, again, that didn't work. And then back to Born Too Late, interesting thing about that is the engineer was Michael Lardy from Great White. And he refused to admit that. He told everybody, no, that wasn't him. That was somebody else named that until doom metal started happening in the 90s. And then all of a sudden he was like, yeah, I engineered Born Too Late. Yeah, well, there you go. That shows you the complete attitude of hair metal in a nutshell. And the cover on Mournful, guys, is really cool because it was apparently for Yngwie, I don't know how to say his last name, so I won't. And I was sitting out, I think it was in Minneapolis or someplace. It was someplace freezing cold. And I was sitting outside smoking a cigarette, and this guy walked up to me, Lionel, I think his name was, and he had a portfolio of his stuff. And he said, I like you guys, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, I do posters and album covers and this and that. And here's my information if you ever want anything done. And he goes, I really think that this picture would work with you guys. And he said he did it for Yngwie. And I looked at it and I thought it was great. And so I said, okay, well, I'd like to use this. How much, what do you want for it? And he said, nothing. He goes, all you have to do is give me credit because I'm so mad that he didn't use this. I put a lot of time and effort into painting that by hand and then copying it. So right away I was like, yeah, I want it. And that's one of our best covers of all time. It's really good. It has absolutely nothing to do with any of the concepts of any of the songs, except maybe Dragon Time. But that's a great album cover, I think.
That was The Lost Feeling, Dying Inside, and Clear Windowpane. And then we heard from Dave once again, another very cool thing. It's so much fun to have Dave. So I know Dave, and some of the guys in the band, they didn't seem to reflect on Mournful Cries with as much reverence as I kind of hoped they would, Yeah,
I was kind of surprised, like where he kind of, I think he mentions later what his favorite things are they did.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily what I would have thought. The second one I completely agree with.
Yeah. I mean, his
But-
favorites, I think, ultimately, he said, is the self-titled debut and
Die
then
Healing.
Die Healing.
Yeah.
Which I get, because like it's like your first child.
Well, and Die Healing is supposed to be the last record.
And
too.
that was kind of, yep. I'm curious now. I don't know. Yeah, I think that's where
just like the sound of it is so different too. But we get into that once we get to talk to that record.
But yeah, Mournful Cries, I kind of asked him, I said, I said it was kind of an overlooked masterpiece that gets overshadowed sometimes by Born Too Late. Because now you get Wino being part of the band from the
writing
aspect. He's going to bring a second guitar in, which I think is a whole new thing
rhythm
for them. And it's got these kind of like weird fantasy elements. And maybe that's the part where
it's like a heavy metal record now.
Yeah.
Like I think the most Dave talks about is he talks about the cover.
Yes.
How he really liked it and paid the kid because there's some little story about it. But that it feels the most like a contemporary. It sounds like a sleep record.
Sure.
Like when you first hear the beginning of Dragon Time, it's like, oh, sleep.
There's where Dragonaut and some of that kind of stuff came from. Yeah, the cover was from Lionel Baker. So
yeah, he like made it. Was this the one that he made for Yngwie Malmsteen?
I think this is the one that.
But he didn't want it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he didn't want it, and then the kid gave it to him for like free.
He just wanted credit.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool.
That's smart.
Yeah, so it's a more dynamic sound. I think this is kind of where they stray the most from their punk roots, at least in this kind of era.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, it's reminding me of like, this could be what Dio Sabbath was if Dio would have done his fantasy shit.
Oh. Sorry, that just felt really good to think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
because you could tell Dio was not trying to go into his wheelhouse when he was writing lyrics for Sabbath. It was way more kind of like society. And
so you think this is like if you meld it like Mob Rules and like Holy Diver together or something like that? That's really
Rainbow.
That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Huh?
Which I don't know if anybody else has ever done that since. Have really done like there's not a whole lot of like fantasy doom stuff that I know of.
I mean like I think of like what like Smolder kind of does a little bit, but that's also got like some Sirathon Ghoul and
yeah, they're not like
Road
straight
and some of that.
Yeah, they're not straight
Gates of Slumber, those kind of bands. I think those are the that's like Conan Doom type stuff is like in that kind of category.
It's just never like bouncy enough for what I want out of my fantasy.
Yeah,
like this has a little bit of like levity to it. It
for
seems
sure.
like too.
Yeah, especially when you get into like Dragon Time.
Even like the lyrics in Dragon Time are stupid, but they're awesome.
And that riff, like in the chorus, especially, like I hear all kinds of like Alex Lifeson, like Rush kind of tones to it, which is like weird. I'm not just his like that like tone that he gets in some of like the heavier kind of tunes that Rush did, like especially in the 70s. But it's fucking simple. It's not complex like Rush. It might be my favorite individual Vitus riff is like in Dragon Time, that like riff that's like like that thing that's just kind of happening in Dragon Time.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's
then eventually the guitar becomes the dragon. The solo becomes him spewing his
that super
flames
flange dynamic. Yep.
Yeah.
The album length 6 songs and done.
Yeah,
it's very much like the less is more sort of aesthetic and things like that. Dude, Acosto does such like restraint with his cymbal work on this record. To me, it's like we've talked about it before in other episodes about how AC/DC, their like approach to everything is to like simplify, but yet that's almost like harder to play sometimes.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So I think like Acosto's taking like a tip from like, how Bill Ward kind of played sometimes, or like restraint. Like Bill Ward could be really jazz and aggressive, but he could also
hold out and just
hit
every third measure
kind of thing. Yep. Yeah. And I think Acosto he's like the second coming of that for me.
Have you seen him play? Do you watch any video of him? He's all kind of, his arms are just kind of moving around and he's just kind of sitting still.
It's almost like he's definitely coming out of like almost like punk, even though he's a Rush fan, but like it's
that, or like
he's just so like untechnical.
Is it Carmine a piece?
Yeah,
he's got that kind of like
from
vibe.
Vanilla Fudge.
Yeah, that kind of vibe to his playing, like a little bit of like theatricality to his playing a little bit.
Okay,
I can see.
I thought when you were describing it, I guess I was thinking he was just maybe like more like loose and less like precise.
He looks he looks so effortless when he plays, but to play that slow is really fucking hard.
Yeah.
to keep the, if it's easier to do something a little more jazzy and upbeat.
Sure.
But yeah, he just makes it look so fucking easy every time.
Yeah.
Or sound easy.
And then we get into, God, I love this whole album. Bitter Truth is fun. Bitter Truth reminds me, especially the solo. This is where I kind of wrote down, like, I'm hearing stuff from like Cathedral's kind of middle era, like stuff like Autumn Twilight and Voyage of the Homo Sapien, like just those sort of like the solo tones in this are fucking great. And you get a Sabbath intro kind of riff. And then I hear a lot of like Melissa, Merciful Fatisms in like some of the atmosphere in this. I don't know if you picked up on any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it feels has more of a 80s heavy metal record vibe all the way around to it, I think.
So maybe that's what I'm kind of getting. It might be like whatever Wino's kind of bringing to the table a little bit. But it definitely has like more of those kind of weird dynamics. But when the main riff punches in on Bitter Truth, I just said, and the guitar leads are like bleeding on top of like the main riff. I said it's one of the most like fist pumping, fuck yeah, headbang moments on the whole record. And the main riff, what's the main riff remind you? Did you write anything about the main riff? Because I have a very distinct...
Nothing specific, no.
It's Megadeth Sympathy for Destruction if like Candlemass was playing it. Like it's, Candlemass has those like dumb, so simple like riffs like on Nightfall and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And how Sympathy for the Destruction is just like, it's like that. That like feeling that you get, but it's like heavy. It's doomier, like Candlemass, but it has that like sort of simple kind of nature to it. But if you can't tell, Mournful Cries is one of my favorite records of theirs. It probably is my favorite Wino record. It's got the edge over Born for me. It's tough though.
They're
Born's
so different.
So personal. This is very much like a fun record. Born maybe that's what it is. Maybe Born, like I'm like emotionally invested in it, and so it like
I think that's
takes
what it
a little
is.
bit more out.
This one's just kind of like a cleansing.
You can just put this on and just like
it's like some D&D.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit of that. And then we end with The Troll, which is like I just wrote a perfect monolithic song title. This might be
it's like classic Sabbath blueprint.
Yeah, it's
stuff.
Like glacial doom. It's an epic glacial doom, And it's sung from the point of view of like a fucking mythological creature, a troll of some sort. So
he's talking about living under rocks or something, I think, too.
Yeah.
But where is it? The guitar chaos about halfway through, where it's just like fucking noise and like that's some of the stuff that Dave really brings. That it just texturizes stuff, but it's not really ever talked about or it's not flashy, but it just kind of amps the chaos of everything up.
You hear it in a song like this, and we won't hear it in this episode, but we'll hear it near the very beginning of part 2 on the 5 record. It's the Patra song. Mm-hmm. Those songs, both the Troll and Patra, both have like those moments you're sort of talking about. And the only record that I hear it done in, at least up to this point, the only record that I think did that in spades and did it really well was the final Jimi Hendrix Experience record, which is Electric Ladyland. Because Hendrix has all these like 13 and 14 minute long songs where he just like lets the songs like de-evolve. Yeah. And he like capture, like he'd do like 60 takes of songs and like take months making shit because everybody was fucking stoned out of their mind in the studio and there were like 60 people hanging out. So it was really chaotic. So he like kind of captured some of that like just raw chaos, but he did it in a way where he turned it into like a musical component too.
Yeah.
And I think I hear that in songs like The Troll and like later Patra, where like it descends into chaos, but it's still like listenable and still like part of the structure of the song,
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
So some pretty kind of interesting things here. So let's get into some Mournful Cry stuff, and then we'll come out and talk about the last kind of things happening here and say our goodbyes for part 1.
fucking unaware squares. They can't tell just where I'm at. Slice me wide. I bleed They say I'm crazy. I should be locked away, but no bars can hold me. Still, spread my decay. Hurt my bad side. I'll make you crack. Slice me wide. I bleed black. I bleed black.
So you just heard I Bleed Black from St. Vitus's 5, and then we heard the trio of tunes from Mournful Cries. We ended there with The Troll, Bitter Truth, and opened with Dragon Time. Ooh. So before we get to 5, we should mention in Mournful Cries was 87. We kind of forgot to mention in between Born and Mournful Cries, you get the Thirsty and Miserable EP, which was the final thing. I think that and Mournful Cries are pretty much
That's the last thing they do for SST.
The end of the road for SST.
Yeah, they go into like, what is it, Hellhound Records?
I think it's
or something
Hellhound
for 5.
Yep.
Like a German label.
Yep. And so we're going to talk a little bit about 5, but not much. I Bleed Black, which you just heard there. All right, here's my weirdest take of the whole St. Vitus. And I got kind of turned on to this by I was reading about some different St. Vitus things. I discovered that this hypnotically repetitive riff is stolen by a good pal of ours, Fenrez, I believe, in a Storm song. And I don't know that much about Storm, but somebody mentioned it, and then I went and listened to it, and I was like, holy fuck, it's the I Bleed Black riff. They're right on.
Well, yeah, Storm is...
Is that Fenris?
No, that's Satir.
Satir.
It's Satir and Kerry Rusladen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. I need that Storm shit now. I don't have it.
I have the promo CD.
Who wants to sell me their Storm shit? All right.
I'm sure you can find it cheap. I don't know if it ever came out in a proper CD.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember the CD ever coming out.
So the song, the Storm song is No Regsgard, which is an awesome Storm song. But
if you like... and
I dig Third and the Mortal, so...
What the fuck is... I can't think of... Isengard.
Okay.
If you like Isengard, you'll like Storm.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Isengard was
No,
Fenris's
Ruslan,
crush.
she's only on it for like a couple tracks for backing vocals. It's
On
very like
Isengard?
that kind of shit for Storm too.
Got it.
They're kindred spirits for sure.
Sure. So yeah, you get that riff kind of at the beginning, and then they just lock onto this sort of perfect formula. I kind of rate, like, by this point, especially with Wino, their sound becomes so reductive, and I mean that in like a really positive sort of way. They are kind of like the Ramones.
Yeah, they've whittled it down to it's just the essence of what needs to be done.
Yeah, it's so like
Seems
like I said,
restrained.
reductive in
Yeah.
a cool way. I mean, the solo in "I Bleed Black" that you just heard there is fucking psych perfection.
Yeah.
I mean, that is like, I don't know if psychedelic doom is really a scene. Maybe that's what stoner doom really is, I guess, or stoner rock. I don't know, but it's there. They're doing that kind of thing, and it's
And Armando's drums are always fucking killer.
yeah, exactly. And this is going to be we'll mention it. We'll talk about it more in the next part. But this is Wino's goodbye for a while.
For a while?
Yeah. So, all right. So we obviously are doing a 2-parter on Saint Vitus here, and so we're going to end with a song from 5. But before we go, as I sort of mentioned, I collected all of our stuff here. So I have some feedback from listeners, and so I wanted to sort of make sure that we sort of acknowledge that.
For the soundtrack show?
Yeah, and just in general, some of the things that we've sort of been doing lately. And I wanted also to acknowledge that we have a lot of new patrons since the last time we recorded, because this has been a while.
Yeah.
So we have Daniel Morrison is in as a new patron. Thank you. Jennifer Klinkman is in as a patron. Thank you. Terry Corbin, new patron. We thank you. Nick Harburg, is in as a patron. And then we have one Gilchrist is what he goes by. And in the patron thing, it's the first one I've gotten that is British pounds. So it has a British pound number next to it, which is interesting because we have Swedish patrons and it always shows up in dollar signs. So I don't know what...
I wonder if it's through PayPal.
Yeah, maybe.
PayPal might have something different with the pound than the kroner. Who knows?
But it shows in kind of that way. But
Interesting.
pretty cool. Yeah. So thank you to some of our new patrons.
It's
and
much
stuff like
appreciated. That's how we bought everything we needed for this 2-part series here.
that. Indeed. And speaking of new patrons, one of those new patrons wrote in about the soundtrack episode, Terry Corbin. He says, I think your coverage was damn good, and the commentary on how influential and important those soundtracks were to young metalheads at the time were. I was definitely at an age to pick up every single one that was highlighted, and it's pretty cool to look back and reflect how much those rocked. Let's see. Pete on Twitter, he said, I had a lot of these soundtracks, but I didn't seem to have crucial ones, it seems. It was one of those right place, right time things. I'm really glad that you guys played Melvin's again and some Sleep. Thank you. And I think he was friends with maybe Trevor. Trevor kind of reshared it.
Okay, cool.
So then we got, this is actually a comment on iTunes. And so this is from April 20th. Biker Crank. Yeah, who knows? Thanks, Biker Crank.
Probably likes Motorhead.
Yeah. From the Melvins episode onwards, I've been a listener. Who would think of the history of the world according to Iron Maiden? These guys. And they've just been getting better. And then someone else commented recently, too, on iTunes. He says, I've been a metal fan all my life. I'm 51. I've been listening to these guys for the past 2 years, and I've been learning things and bands I didn't know. Great podcast. He did say, he says, sometimes the audio volume on your guests is too low. So we've been working on that.
Yeah, we've been getting that. I
so-
think the punk show, it all sounds pretty solid now.
Yeah. Yep, which you will have heard, obviously, by now. So we'll be getting feedback on the punk show for future episodes when we're recording this. Here's somebody wrote in on Friday, Alan, with a smiley face, Alan, on iTunes. This is the stuff that music nerds love. These are the guys you could talk about music with for hours on end after everyone else has stopped listening to you. Thoughtful, well-developed episodes, thoroughly researched, and all focused through the lens of a deep and true love of music. Analysis of the minutia, presented from the point of view of years of experience in the scene and an overwhelming enthusiasm for material. This is like your favorite professor's designed a never-ending lecture course after school club on metal. Subscribe.
It might be one of the best ones I've ever heard.
Hell yeah. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
I couldn't sum it up quite
Yeah,
so.
that
That's
was
like
like-
what we're attempting. So if anybody gets it, that's very flattering. I appreciate that.
So by the way, go to iTunes right now and leave a comment, leave a rating for us, and we'll read it on future episodes. So if you, if
I honestly
it's
don't
a
check that very often.
Self-fulfilling destiny.
That's
Yeah,
great.
I scroll down every so often because I remember to be like,
Spotify don't have ratings?
no, I think because we're not hosted on Spotify. I think that's why.
There's the rub.
Yep.
We don't have arthritis medication hats.
Yeah, we do not.
Sorry, Pfizer.
So go there and do that. And let's see. Here's another one. This is from pretty recently too, on iTunes. If you think you already know everything there is to know about your favorite metal bands, you're wrong.
Whoa.
Requiem Metal Podcast dives into lesser-known details, obscure bands, overlooked recordings, influential albums that pioneered entire subgenres of metal, and much more. These guys have ate, slept, and breathed metal for over 25 years. They know their stuff, and it's all spoken from the perspective of a couple of awesome guys who could have been your best friends in high school. That's us.
Nice.
I love this podcast! ! So that was a good one. Let's see. This is another one. Oh, these guys are the real deal. This is from Vinny. This is actually last Friday. These guys are the real deal. No nonsense, just straight metal talk. You will either discover your new favorite band or find out something about your favorite band that you never knew before. So, yeah, I agree. Whoops.
Thank you, Vinny.
Yeah, thank you, Vinny. Let's see. This is from Rogue Moose on iTunes. So we got quite a few new ones on iTunes. The knowledge and dedication to research for each episode is just perfect. Getting background info on what affected bands or albums is really interesting, and you can tell the passion Mark and Jason have for metal. There's been such an awesome find, and I'm so excited to hear what they cover next. So good stuff there on iTunes. Nicholas Harburg, one of our new patrons, wrote about the first punk episode. I think. Yeah.
Did he got the...
Oh, no, you know what? This is, I'm sorry. This is about, it's got to be. Yep. So he signed up right when he heard about that, I think, and then
nice.
became a patron and then instantly listened to the show.
Sweet.
He said, this episode was fantastic. He said, discovering Crass when I was younger changed everything musically for me. Seeing Jeff Walker wear a Crass shirt is how I knew that Carcass weren't just random meatheads. Dave Edwardson wearing a Final Conflict shirt got me into Neurosis as a kid as well.
Nice.
So it's pretty cool. This is another podcast that called Pod Like a Hole. They actually want us to like team up with them and do like a weird, like maybe a Nine Inch Nails show or a Ministry show or something.
I'd be more.
I think they cover like a lot of industrial stuff. So yeah, we could maybe do some heavier end industrial stuff with them or whatever, or have them on. But he said, I'm loving listening to this trilogy of soundtrack episodes. He says, we touched on this phenom through the Nine Inch Nails prism some years earlier. The Crow, Natural Born Killers, Lost Highway. That was another one I forgot to mention was Lost Highway. So, and Spawn, which we're all covered. So, yeah.
Six Twad.
Yep. So he kind of wrote that back. Let's see. This is another one from, Nick Harburg. This is on Twitter. That's probably, I think, where he first heard about it. He said, Neurosis turned me on to your podcast. Disrupt and Bolt Thrower episodes filled my heart with joy. Talking about what White Dwarf in the soundtrack episode seals the deal. You're doing fantastic things. We were talking about White Dwarf?
The BBC series.
BBC series, yeah. That's what it was. Jesse Levy gave us some info. He says, hey, the Nine Inch Nails song at the beginning of 7 was the Closer to God, which is a remix of Closer.
Okay.
So that's what we were hearing. He says it's actually a pretty good one too. Yeah. I'm usually not a fan of remixes, but that one is pretty killer. I did also want to mention a shout out for those of you that don't follow us on social media that Verathron loved our episode, and I'll actually read his comment.
They made a special
special graphic for episode 217, which
cool.
was part 4 of our Greek metal series that we did. Boy, year and a half ago. It was pre-COVID. It was like released right before kind of COVID hit. So yeah,
it was like last winter or something.
Yeah, it was like 2020, like February 2020 or something like that. But yeah, Stratos Kountoros is from Verathron, And he just wrote this. He says, hi, Jason and Mark. I sat down and listened to the whole podcast. To be honest, some parts gave me the chills of how accurate your assumptions were, or how close to reality were some of your speculations and thoughts. I would like to thank you for your support in the Greek black metal scene, which struggled a lot in the past. Much appreciated. Also, all of your remarks, and especially that of 90s Peaceville Records era, Bride, Tiamat, Anathema, Catatonia, Samael, Paradise Lost, were right on point. Again, it was a great listen. I really enjoyed it. By the way, us and Christ Agony are close friends, so that was also spot on. I'm impressed. So, hey, we did our best, man. We try, and it's cool when like bands actually like kind of get in touch and stuff like that. I
think at least for one of my takeaways was that Varathon was one of the best bands too. So hopefully they appreciated
without a doubt,
the little bit like after the fact, because I know Riding Christ kind of like carried the flag for quite a while, but I think Varathon was right there with them.
One of our patrons, Terry Corbin, new patron, he said, "Hey guys, just wanted to say thanks for the hours upon hours of entertainment and knowledge you're sharing. I got into Requiem through the Neurosis episodes and just got hooked. Dove into the past Slayer episodes and some random others. Definitely make the hour-long commute to work much more enjoyable."
Yes.
He said, "Honestly, I never had an interest in podcasts before, but I finally found one that clicks. So cheers. It's great to listen to two friends talk about music and digging into the history of it all. It reminds me of good times growing up. Can't wait for all the exciting episodes to come." So it was a cool comment.
That's cool.
Nick Green, who was one of our guests.
Oh, that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. Nick Green, I think he really enjoyed our episodes, and he was a guest on the soundtrack episodes. And so he shared that episode, and he said, "Hey, quick plug for these guys, because every one of their episodes is a labor of love, and they're not getting rich doing it." Speaking of, we'll talk about Patreon in a second. Mark and Jason are so locked in right now that they could take turns reading the back of a cereal box, and it would still be highly engrossing.
Ooh. Nice.
Yours truly, cameos in this latest episode talking about the Judgment Night soundtrack, but the recent episodes on Neurosis and In Solitude are where it's at.
Ooh, nice.
Great Beck song, Where It's At, baby. So yeah, if you would like to become a supporter, and you would like to hear, in fact, Mark and I just got done recording an epic Patreon show where we talk about all the movies we've been watching, all the music we've been listening to, in addition to St. Vitus. And you can get there by going to requiemmetal.com, and there is a Patreon link that you can click on right there. There's also our first 160 episodes. If you're new to the podcast, that's where those are housed. There's links to merch and other things like that. So please do check out the website, requiemmetal.com, and you can click on Become a Patreon, or you can go to patreon.com/Requiem Podcast and sign up. $5 a month, $10 a month. I mean, that's not that much in hindsight to the money you waste on something you're streaming or coffees or something.
Over COVID, I realized that I had Hulu, I had Netflix, I had like all these stupid subscription services. I'd never used them. The last time I watched Netflix was Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
I watched it all and then I was done, and I've like got rid of it, and that was $12 a month. And if you don't use it, I've become like acutely aware of how much alternative media I've been like kind of taking in and trying to give back to a lot of those people too. So I'm hoping the next, 3 or 4 years we can kind of slowly erode the mainstream media Hollywood system and have it more
everything
user based and
catered to like your wants. And
like with the internet now, like you can have the most specific tastes and have enough podcasts to last you more times than you can listen.
Sure.
It's kind of a embarrassment of riches right now.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm a Patreon supporter of stuff. Mark's a Patreon supporter of stuff. I mean, and to think like, you're helping us out. We're not throwing, advertisements at you and stuff like that. We're doing a lot of dedicated research. We're getting you these Dave Chandler interviews. We got you Neurosis interviews. Like that's the kind of stuff we want to start doing.
It's a value for value proposition.
And I think the more Patreons we get, the more motivation I have to put the work in to track down to Dave Chandler and bug him and see if he'd be doing stuff like this. The more motivation Mark has to edit all that stuff, because that's a lot. Every time I do that shit to Mark, it's just like, oh God, it's a labor of love, but it creates more work. The amount of
time that like extra time Jason puts into like setting a lot of this shit up, I'm doing the equal amount editing
pre-production,
the show and
post-production. That's how I always explain it, So that's kind of like that's why it's a marriage made in heaven.
We pretty soon I'm going to have to stop editing on my 2007 iMac.
Yeah. If anything, if there's a reason to become a Patreon, it's because we're dangerously close to losing potentially lots of stuff, and then like all those old episodes just fucking disappear.
Well, I've been backing everything up.
Just kidding. Yeah.
But if you want to have it every week.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. That's we want this consistency, and maybe if we get enough to constantly do it at one a week.
God, yeah. We hope you dig this weekly schedule that we're kind of locking into right here.
Because it's helping with my kind of motivation too. Then you're always kind of like, what's the next thing? It's not like do a bunch of shit and then you just kind of wait for, I was like, oh, what are we going to do next time?
Well, even like the fact that we're recording St. Vitus, and it's been almost a month since we recorded last. And that's because we did a lot of work prepping the Ian Glasper shows, the soundtrack shows, and luckily it was my spring break, so I could just be intensely like dedicated for 2 straight days of recording, which is what we had to do.
Yeah, I mean, we probably did 16 hours or something.
Oh, at least. It was not, because we did a Patreon show, and we did the soundtracks, and we did the Ian Glasper. It was impressive.
Oh yeah. That was
like literally we recorded 6 episodes in 2 days.
Yeah, I came up here, and then you came down for the next one.
I mean, that's the thing, like gas money, all this other stuff. I mean, that's what we're kind of asking for. And if we're going to be giving you like 3 to 4 episodes a month compared to 1 a month, that's pretty good value.
And mostly 2.5 plus hours each.
Exactly. So again, become a patron, do your honor. We deserve it. You deserve it. We all deserve it. And there's special episodes that we release on a semi-monthly basis. You're also getting access to like all our episodes a week early.
Yep.
In case people didn't know that. That's kind of still
when that new episode comes out, if you're a patron, you get the next week's immediately.
You got it. So sign up, become a patron, all that stuff. So I have a few more letters real quick, a few more comments, because we got a lion's share from a lot of the stuff we've been doing. So the guy that planted the seed in a lot of ways to do that 90s soundtrack episode, or at least like pushed me over the edge, was Seth Forsman, who's one of our patrons as well. And he wrote 2 things. He said, 1, fantastic. Part 1 was everything I imagined it would be. You guys hit the bullseye on everything. I was alone driving in my car just yelling, yes, exactly, every 5 minutes. And then he commented on part 2. He says, just hit the moment in part 2 where you guys say you want to do a Smashing Pumpkins episode. Do it. I know you guys want to keep the focus on metal, as you should, but I was making a playlist for the friend last night, and I thought it would be a cool Patreon ep to talk about non-metal songs that are dark and heavy, just as a result of lyrical themes and atmosphere. Coffee has me all over the place this morning. That's what he said. Well, we'll have you know that our latest Patreon episode has a significant amount of non-metal, but we can't tell you what's on it unless you're a patron. But we do get in some,
it's spread, not even close
spread
to
our
metal.
Wings. Yeah, we spread our wings a lot on that stuff.
Yeah.
A couple more things. This is somebody, Sentianot985, and he follows us on Twitter. I don't think he's really a bot. I think that's the joke. He says, off topic, but this, quote, multi-hour Patreon just shooting the shit on Beverly Hills Cop Midnight Run running scared 80s action comedy idea ... And then he included the Simpsons meme where Barney says, just hook it in my veins. So he's excited for it. He wants that episode.
If we get a couple more people saying they're into it. I mean, nobody's ever said, I wish you didn't spend that time talking about that thing.
I know. But. And then I wanted to, just in case you don't think I can laugh at myself, and sometimes I make mistakes, and sometimes Mark makes mistakes. This is Andreas, our greatest patron, our longest patron, and he wrote something after part 1. He says, I'm not done listening to this yet, but I just heard Mark's best quote in 240 episodes, and the laughter outburst that followed it forced me to stop. Mark talking about person puking sign, Queensryche, person puking sign, referring to person puking sign Jeff Tate's voice. I hate this. I really hate Jeff Tate's vocals the later on in his career. It really bothers me. I just see his face and want to punch it. Abso-fucking-lutely. I feel that someone has finally come up with the perfect sentence to describe a feeling I've been harboring for 30 fucking years. Wow. I don't want to get too corny here, but no other human being is closer to my heart at this precise moment. All right, I'm going to finish with this automatically become my new favorite Requiem episode of all time.
I'm glad you don't like Jeff Tate as much as I don't like Jeff Tate.
So that's good, because somebody's got to balance that with me a little bit. Luke said something about the Queensryche thing too, and it was I was laughing when he said it because it was like, oh man, it's a lot of conversation. Luke is one of our patrons as well, and he's over in Taiwan, so he's been sending me. He just picked up Chemical Wedding on vinyl, so he was super pumped about that. Let's see, where is it? Oof, got to go with Mark on the Queensryche tune. It's a bit much. So there's a separate message. He said that it's a bit much. So
it's borderline adult contemporary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then he says, I enjoyed up through Operation Mindcrime. And then he says, I didn't get into it after that. So pretty funny. And then he sent this. He was in a Taiwanese market and he spotted the Last Action Hero soundtrack on cassette tape.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Nice.
And Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey
on a bootleg DVD.
And Rat Detonator. So
nice.
All relevant to
that's all those cutout band shit that we sold them years ago.
Exactly. It's the global metal kind of stuff. So, but yeah, so if you would like to become a patron, we appreciate that. If you want to get a hold of us on social media and kind of follow some of the happenings that we have, you can follow us on Twitter, Jason and Mark, on Facebook, Instagram. I don't use it that much, but that's how I've gotten in touch with.
I'm there if you want to look at me.
Yeah, there you go. Mark's on there. Yeah.
That's the only social media I'm on.
Yeah. And so, yes, if you'd like to follow us there, sign up, become a Patreon, and leave a review on iTunes, and we'll read it live, and you'll be famous. You'll be as famous as Mark and I are.
Oh, yes.
I mean, when you live our kind of celebrity lifestyle using 2007 Macs.
It's always been like people that I've met, just, fucking dinner parties when that used to happen. Oh, so what do you do? Tell them a little bit. Like, I do, like, I've done like some podcasting for a while.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you like famous? I was like, maybe 100 people might know who I am.
in like a really interesting Venn diagram circle. Yeah, people know us, but like
between my illustrations and podcasts, probably at least 100 people could point my name out and say, hey,
sure,
that guy.
I do have one more comment, and I got to find it. Because not only did Verathron get in touch with us about some kind of their feelings in terms of podcast stuff, but so did, I gotta find his damn message. I'm looking for his name. So did one of the members of In Solitude, and I thought that was really cool to sort of hear that from him. But I can't frickin' find it right now. Maybe I'll have to save it for part 2.
It was the bass player, wasn't it?
I think it was it was the brother.
Yeah, it was the bass player.
Yeah, the brother. And I can't
think his name.
Oh, here it is. Yep, Gottfried.
Okay.
And he discovered our 2-part In Solitude, so I think this is a great message to sort of come on. He says, wow, a lot to take in here. Sort of in shock. Got through most of it. Must say you did many spot-on remarks, though some of the musical references were quite alien to me. I'll have to check them out, though. I feel very happy and honored to still have music being played and talked about in this fashion. Thank you. You also had me listening to songs I hadn't heard in many years. A fun and somewhat uncomfortable ride. Did you say you've taught sister in rock history class? Not quite, but I talked
soon.
Maybe I was talking about like Joy Division or something like that.
Yeah.
He says, by the way, I don't think there's many movies, and this is pretty cool, many movies I've seen more times than Eyes Wide Shut.
So, we could do a whole show about that.
But like we brought that up in that episode, so it was cool that like we're on like that wavelength with where their aesthetics coming from.
I think if you're honest about what you like, I think it shows through.
Yeah, for sure.
People that are on the same wavelength can pick up on that.
For sure. So, all right, well, we're going to end with Mind Food from St. Vitus's 5. This is a kind of a fun, more upbeat kind of rock, almost Caius kind of Queens of the Stone Age.
Very
type
blown
tune.
out guitars.
Yeah, so it's kind of a fun way. There's not much to say about it, but it's a good way to ride out in the sunset. So
yeah,
for St. Vitus Part 1, 5, we'll come back and talk more about that record in Part 2. I'm Jason.
I'm Mark.